Okay, good. Done. It's off.
Okay, here we go. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. We're happy you guys are here for whoever can hear my voice thus far. And I'm sure more people will come in as we get going. So tonight's topic is revolution, uprising. And we'll get into that in just a moment. First, we'll say hello to everyone on the panel. For those of you listening for the first time, my name is Jason, and I am one of the hosts. I look at it as a panel of hosts, but I'm the main one. I do most of the reading most times, and it's a thrill and a pleasure to be in this place and to have such a wonderful panel as I do tonight and every Sunday night. We were not here last Sunday night, but we're glad to be back, and we have hopefully what you will think is a great topic for tonight. So I will say hello to my wife, Jennifer, first this time. And Jennifer, if you could say hello to the people, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So, hello, husband. And hello, Glenzo, the
Yes,
keeper of cats and
builder of
spit
fences.
and walls and Spitfire wife and slayer of crazy lying neighbors.
Yes, that's right.
Doing really well. We've got some people in. Jamie Grace is here. We've got Annette, John Dons, Debbie S is here. Hey, everybody.
Yeah,
And then
welcome.
Annie was in here and she left a comment, but then I guess it disappeared, so I wasn't sure where it went.
It may have been me that did that when I came back, and because we had some internet issues, and I had to reset the
Oh,
internet, and it shut off the connection. I had it sitting there waiting for when
gotcha.
one got his end ready. And so I was concerned about that. So I reset it, and when I reset it, the some of the chat stuff disappeared.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I don't know if that's what happened, but that's what I did. Well, Janet just popped in, so we'll say hello to her. Glenn didn't really get a chance to say hello. So our producer and our friend from Australia, Glenn, if you could just say hello, quick hello to everyone.
Yeah, hi. I just saw this topic. Is this the American Revolution and I'm going to get paid out because I'm of British descent or what?
That would be great. I think if that were the case, there'd be a lot of people that were owed some monies, so to speak. Huh?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Well, no. Tonight's topic is, as you guys will see shortly, it's not about a world revolution, though that would be good. And we'll get into the write up here in just a second. And I'm excited about this because what we're going to be talking about tonight is a personal revolution, revolution in our own lives. Fighting against what I perceive as oppression from other people and institutions and things. And well, I won't spoil it for everyone. I'll read that in just a second. So Daryl just popped in, and haven't seen Daryl in a while. I miss you, buddy. I'm glad that you're here. I hope everything's going well with you, and just appreciate everyone who's in the chat. And so as people come in, we'll try to say hello to everyone, and we'll dive right into the topic. All right. As I said, tonight's topic is revolution uprising. We need a revolution. Throughout the history that they tell us, there have been a few revolutions. People revolting against oppressive rulers, governments, or regimes that try to restrict liberty, restrain freedom, and avoid peace. The call to revolution today might stir something in a few that hear this. There are many of us today, me included, that can see our freedoms, our liberties, and our peace being eroded in front of our eyes, step by step, little by little, piece by piece. And it seems like there's not much we can do about it. What it would take to stop what is clearly happening would be nothing short of people like you and me setting aside all perceived differences and joining together to fight a common foe, gathering our resolve in unison, several voices intermingled to become one voice, screaming out for light in darkness, for freedom from captivity, for peace out of war and liberty from slavery. Since what I am suggesting likely will not ever happen, and there's no call to arms that anyone would heed in terms of fighting against our oppressors, when few are even able to see they are truly being oppressed, I will stick to what we can handle, what we can fight against, what we do have the power to change ourselves. For inspiration, one of my favorite groups, Muse, with Uprising, including lyrics, and the link is in the description. Check it out. And there were several different versions, but I picked the one with the lyrics because I believe they really tie in. Now, their song is about kind of what I said at the outset. It's about people, in governments and things like that being the oppressors. But as I was started to say, because we can't do much about that, um, what we can talk about is a revolution in our own lives. So we need a revolution in our own lives. We have been talking about all these subjects recently, about the things that keep us locked up, that keeps us from not feeling safe, allowing others to tell us who we are and who we should be. We've discussed how our childhoods are affected by these external controls from parents, institutions, governments, society itself, and how it distorts our view of self. And when that happens, it changes our lives and not for the better. What do all these questions we ask on these broadcasts lead us to in the end? Are we changing? Are we growing? Does asking questions do any good? Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long lasting change? In other words, what difference does any of this make? If I could have anything I want, I would hope that these broadcasts, all the questions we have asked, all the topics we've covered, would lead to self reflection. And not in a self absorbed way, but to understand oneself better in order to defeat the programming from others and allow every person to decide how they want to live rather than being told how to live. Put all the topics together, and what I see is a call to revolution, not in the greater world, but in our own world, our own personal existence. In my opinion, before any great change can happen in the larger world, the change, the growth, the revolution must start with you first. We have all had different childhoods, different parents, different upbringings. But what is one thing we all have in common? We were all at the mercy of the programming of others. The way our parents were raised and their parents and so on has trickled down over time and affected how we were raised, Morality, politics, our view of society, religion, the values we are taught, all play a huge role in shaping who we are. No parents, no government, no society, no religion is perfect. So where does that leave us? We can only be as good, as healthy, as well balanced as the people who influence us are able to be. I have talked a lot and have been very open about who my parents were and how I perceive their mistakes in raising me. It's easy for me to say, not being a parent myself, that they made so many errors. Even though I'm not a father, I am a son, and I am able to examine my childhood and I can identify a few things I perceive that help shape me into who I am in good ways and bad. My mother, Linda, started out as a victim of her childhood, and in her early 30s, she went through a revolution which trickled down to me and affected my life until this day. So, as you might imagine, my world changed and became a fight between the old programming and the new. As she changed and learned and grew, she also did the way she parented, and our relationship changed as well. This was not overnight, and it never ended. And for my mother, though she was able to heal many things with the help of her God, there were things she died not being able to escape. Her legacy was one of self evaluation and a desire to heal, to break the chains put on us by others, and desire to become free, healthy, and live a life of peace. A call to revolution, not in this world, but in our own lives. How do we start? What steps do we take? Can we really change anything? Can we reprogram ourselves? Can we be free? Can we have liberty in our own lives? Does peace exist in this world? What does a revolution look like to you? What can we expect from others close to us when we strive for our own revolution? Can we do it alone? Who can we trust to come alongside us in our journey? What tools can aid us on this path? How do we know our own personal revolution is beneficial to those around us instead of harmful? And does that matter, or should it? Can our own personal revolution be a beacon of light to others? All right. That's the write up and the subject for tonight, and we'll get into all the questions. I just want to check the chat and see if anyone else popped in. I think we already said hello to Debbie. Helene is here. Hello, Helene. We're glad
Janet popped in too.
Yep, Janet. We're glad you're here, Janet. I hope you're able to hear everyone well. She said a couple times that she sometimes she can hear me fine, but has trouble hearing other people. So I hope that's gotten better for you, Janet. And Gragu is here. Hello, Gragu. Makes me think of that ragu sauce for some reason. I don't know. Spaghetti sauce. All right. All right. We're going to dive right in. All right. So scrolling back up to the first question. Now, guys, we just as a reminder, we will have to change over again like we normally do with the chat. So there'll be a moment. Glenn's gotten really good at switching it over, and he will let us know when we're close, and then we'll switch over. So just want to make you aware of that. And also, sometimes we have the slides with the questions in there, but because we've had some issues with that and some lagging and things, and it just totally just messing up. We've left those out for tonight, but I believe Jen's going to try to put them in the chat. But all these questions are in the write-up as well, in the description, so you can go back and take a look at those. But as usual, we would love for you to answer any of the questions that you would like to answer in the topic. And if you would like us to read your answers, just do me a favor and put them all in caps for me, and I will kind of keep an eye on the chat and read those as they come in. Okay. All right. All right. So the first one, I'll read the sentence above. So I'm talking about morality, politics, our view of society, religion, the values we're taught all play a huge role in shaping who we are. Then I say, no parents, no government, no society, no religion is perfect. So where does that leave us? So if I'm trying to make the point that all these things, parents and governments and society and schools and churches and all these institutions, even relatives, grandparents, friends, all of that, if that plays a role in who we are and they're not perfect, where does that leave us? We're in an imperfect system. So what's the expectation about that? Where does it leave us when all these things that are in charge of raising us up and teaching us how to be valuable members of the society, when those things are not ever perfect? What do we do with that? What do you think, Jen?
Dang it. I was not paying attention. I was actually highlighting the questions to put
Oh,
in the
okay.
chat. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Wait, so can you condense that into a short question real quick?
Yeah, when all the people that are in charge of us are not perfect, where does that leave us? I'm basically asking the question, since our parents aren't perfect, so what do we do with that? I mean, in terms of a revolution, when we're starting out from a place of already flawed learning, or
Yeah.
flawed people teaching other flawed people.
I would say self-growth is a great place to start because, as I've been learning over the last handful of years, I cannot change anybody but myself.
Right.
So it's got to start with me. And sometimes it starts and ends with ourselves, because some people don't want to grow along with us,
Oh,
whether
yeah.
it's government or schooling or parents or siblings,
Sure.
friends.
Sure.
Sometimes you're like, I've been in that place where I've gotten stuck, trying to learn and change,
Yeah.
and the people around me aren't going with me. And so it's hindering my own growth
Yeah.
and healing.
Yeah. So the change that we go through, we can still do, regardless of how we were raised, or understanding that nothing's perfect. If everything was perfect, we're not even having this conversation. I mean, if all
Yeah.
society was perfect and governments were
Hmm.
perfect, then there probably wouldn't need a revolution, and you probably wouldn't need to work. We wouldn't need to work on ourselves so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that answer. I would say that the expectation is not perfection. My mother had
Good point.
on her, she had a minivan, and she had not a vanity plate, but the plates that you buy and you put on the front of the vehicle that have different sayings, and it said progress, not perfection. And she
Yes.
she said that all the time to her clients, and of course
I
I've
like
heard it
that.
many times. So her expectation wasn't that she was ever going to be perfect in this world. It was that she was progressing. So the terms we use are, recovery, growing, and changing. And if I went back and looked at all the write ups, from the past several months that we've been doing this, we talk about it a lot. I mean, we keep kind of pounding on the same things, because I think it's because we believe that that is what's important. We can't go back and change the fact that the people that raised us and the governments and the schools aren't perfect. There's nothing we can do about that. It's kind of the point that I was getting at.
Yeah. We can't even time travel and go back and change it. So,
Right, right. We can't
darn it.
that would be fun, though. That would be fun. Um, so even though these institutions and things weren't perfect, that doesn't leave us out in the cold. We can still grow and still change, um, not striving for perfection, but for progress. That's my answer to that. Glenn, what about you? No parents, no government, no society, no religion is perfect. So where does that leave us?
With a choice.
Wow.
Yeah. Bam.
Okay.
Bottom line, Glenn.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
it's true. You
Yeah.
either go with it or you decide to change it.
I love it. I love it. And that's what we're talking about tonight, hopefully, is that, you have the choice to change. If you don't like the way things are in your life, um, even if you can't change the society around you, you have very little control over that. You do have some control, at least, over yourself, and you can make that choice for yourself, even if you can't, be super effectual. I mean, I hear this all the time. Like, people like, oh, we need to get together. And I mean, this. I'm not the one that came up with this. I mean, people have been talking about this for a long time. But the problem is, you would have to get everyone to agree, and a lot of people, they don't agree. And little things, little arguments can break groups apart. It seems like nowadays. Um, so if you can't get everyone to agree, can't get everyone on the same page, how is it ever going to be a revolution? How's it ever going to be a cohesive group that, stands united? I remember, I think it was Reagan. Reagan made the statement in one of his speeches. And I'm paraphrasing him, but he basically said, "It's too bad there's not some kind of alien invasion that would come upon us, some common foe that we would gather together and join forces to fight against." I mean, he really said this.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously, the idea of that is already out there. I know that in the American Revolution, that they had a common foe. According to history, the British and their taxes, and there were many reasons why the War for Independence happened. But historically, they had a lot of people that were tired of being oppressed, and that's why they came to America in the first place: religious persecution. And at least that's the reason they tell us. I mean, there's lots of information that that says that that's not the only reason, but that's the reason they tell us. And then, they fought, they did what they had to do. Many patriots, quote unquote, gathered together, and there was a common foe. Uh, and everyone didn't agree on everything. I mean, when you read the founding fathers of our country, they often argued over various points back and forth. And in fact, the Declaration of Independence, it took a long time to write because of all these arguments. But they were at least able, after lots of debate and going over these points when writing the Constitution, they were able to agree on many things. And to them, the way that the Declaration of Independence even starts is these truths to be self-evident, meaning that it should be evident to everyone, these things that they espoused. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We could argue that whether happiness is even attainable, but they thought it was. And part of striving for those things was not to be governed by a tyrannical ruler who still trying to keep his hands on them when they wanted to be their own independent country. Okay, so that was the way that it was then, and then I could go on about the French. I love history. I could go on about the French Revolution and all the things that happened to bring that about. But here again, you had people that didn't agree on everything, but they all agreed that the people in leadership over them, they were tired of them getting the scraps of everything and them doing all the work, and these royals in their posh castles and with their cake and their chariots, their fine chariots and their fine homes and access to all these good things. They had everything while most people had nothing. And, they got tired enough to do something about it. And there's lots of other political stuff in there as well, but that's the essence of that. So I guess my point is that when you're dealing with groups of people, you may not agree with everything, but if you have a common foe, that you can rise up.
Yeah.
I would make the point that the common foe in our own lives is our programming. As I said in the write-up, there are things that we have been told, and some of them are good. Some of them, I mean, my parents taught me many good things. I have values and morals that were passed on to me because of the way my parents were raised and because of the way their parents raised them, that are good. It's not like everything was bad, but what do you do with all the things that haven't been helpful? Because again, my parents were not perfect. And so my childhood, the things that they tried to instill in me could only be as good as they were. And when I became an adult, then I was able to look back at these things. And in my opinion, I have taken what is valuable to me that I can use, and I have worked hard to try to break the programming of the things that I didn't want, that I don't feel are useful.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's my long rant about that. Okay, so we've answered the first question, so I'm going to scroll down to the next one. So this is toward the end, and all these questions are kind of grouped in the same place. And so I was hoping that that these questions would spark some more conversation, rather than I could have put them throughout the whole write-up, but this is the way that I did it. So,
I was going to say real quick, Annie did have a good question in the
oh,
comments.
please read it.
So she said, how do you become aware of that choice, though? And you were talking about the choice that, or I think it was after Glenn had said that we all have a choice
Hmm.
to change. And so I guess what Annie's referring to is there are people out there, which I do believe, that don't realize they have a choice. So how would you become aware of the fact that you have a choice?
That is a great question. I would say that dissatisfaction is one of the best indicators that something is wrong. but that might not lead you to believe that you have a choice.
Yeah.
Um, it certainly would make you wonder how you got in certain scenarios. Like if you keep choosing abusive relationships one after the other, it seems like if that were happening, you would ask the question, why do I keep uh, getting myself in and choosing people that are abusive to me? Why is that continuing to happen? And some people do ask that question. Otherwise, we would have no recovery. We would have no one that has been through this and is in a different place now. Um, so I would say that self examination is important, but how does that even happen? How does one get to the point
Mm.
they're not used to doing? How does
I
one?
know. I was going to
Go
say, I
ahead.
know for me, it was people coming into my life to point out to me, you have a choice, which I'm still flabbergasted that I lived in a time and a place for many years where
Yeah,
I did not think I had a choice. And so looking back at that now, knowing that I do is just mind blowing. I'm like, I can't believe I lived in this reality
yeah,
that wasn't necessarily reality, my own inner reality that I just I didn't have a choice to change what was going on around me and in my life. And oh my gosh, just insane. So yeah, having some people in your life that can come alongside you and say, hey, you have a choice in this situation, whatever it might be.
yeah,
Maybe it's just in growth. You have a choice to look within yourself and to grow and learn and change. Um, you know, could be just that.
yeah. Thank you, Jen. So I don't know how many of you have seen the movie The Matrix. Um, but it's about the character in the Matrix, Neo. He learns he has a choice because of people coming into his life, but there were things leading up to that.
Yeah.
He was dissatisfied with his job. He had this feeling like something was wrong, and he couldn't quite put his finger on it. So his dissatisfaction led him to do other things in his life, like he was a kind of a hacker, and he looking into things that he probably shouldn't have been looking into, and things like that. And that actually led him to the people that were helping, that eventually helped him learn that he did have a choice. And
Hmm.
he had a pretty cut and dry. It's not always so cut and dry as it was in this movie. I mean, it literally was take the blue pill or take the red pill. One of the pills, he would go back into his slumber and not be aware that there was a whole nother world, and he would stay in his slavery. This is actually a good analogy. So he could stay in that place and forget that he was ever aware that something was wrong, and he could just, ignorance is bliss. He could just go back to his sleepy world that was a lie. And some people honestly choose. I tell Jen all the time, there are people that it's too difficult for revolution. It's too difficult for healing and change because it's going against everything that you've learned, and it's also going against people in your life who want you to stay in that sleep place. So in terms of Neo, he, just like you're saying, Jen, people, kind of met you by lots of quote unquote coincidences, not. Uh, uh, and when they met you, they could clearly see that you were this wonderful shining light, and and then when you started to talk about your situation, it was like, well, that's not good. Uh,
Nope.
no.
And
So
sometimes that's what it takes.
yeah,
I think we've talked about many times how we get stuck in that bubble where what we're living in, no matter what it is, government stuff or
yeah,
life or family or abuse,
right,
or and you
right,
get so used to what you're dealing with day in and day out, it becomes normal. And sometimes it takes some people from the outside to say, "Hey, this this isn't normal." And
yeah,
you're like, "What?" And then you really look at it.
right. Yeah, when it is the self-evaluation thing that has to happen. And Annie's question is a good one. how do you realize that you have a choice? And I think it might be different for different people. I mean, but the self-evaluation thing has to happen eventually. If you're not looking into yourself, if you're not looking into your situation, I don't know how you ever would see that you have a choice. I mean, unless someone just walked up to you and said, "Hey, you got a choice. You know, you don't have to live like this." But how often does that happen? The point I was wondering, Jen, if you knew before you met Glenn and myself, was there obviously there was looking back at the life you were living, there was obviously something about it that you didn't like. I mean, you just did
Yeah,
you
there's a
didn't
lot.
wake up one day and say, "Oh, I don't like this anymore."
Oh no, it was a long years and years and years of
Right,
misery.
right. So long years of misery. It just when the timing was right, and you met Glenn and I, and and started having these conversations, it became even more starkly aware to you. That's a weird sentence.
No, that's
It,
good.
it became you became more aware that the things that you knew were wrong, when someone from the outside is
It's
seeing it,
validating. Yeah, they're like
validating.
acknowledging this is because
Right.
there were times here and there that I thought, okay, something is really off about this. But then I would go back into my slumber. Um,
Yeah.
and I was going to say too, and this pertains to this topic and all the things it touches, but I truly felt like I knew that I was willing to change. I knew that I was willing to grow and learn different things to make things better. But the person I was paired with not only refused to change or do their own inner work and healing and looking inward, but they refused to even see that there was anything wrong with the situation we were in day in and day out,
Yeah.
and that they had any part to play in it.
Right.
So that was really frustrating. And I think sometimes we can, and I guess in a way it is an excuse to think, well, I can't change anything because this person I'm with, or this friend, or this family member, or this government, or it could be so many things. They're not willing to even admit that there's anything wrong. So I can't
Right.
change because these people around me won't change.
Right.
And I think it's important to realize that um, we can change ourselves, separate from anything and anybody else around us, and it still does make a difference. It really, really
Wow.
does. And I think a lot of us feel so insignificant, but I keep thinking about the butterfly effect, that ripple effect.
Yeah.
And inspiration and encouragement. It's just such a contagious thing.
It
People
sure
around
is.
you do feel it, they do see it.
Yeah.
And we all experience that when people stand up for what's right, or they start healing, or
Yeah.
start making better choices. There's so many things.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Jen. You know, the first question I asked is after I read the write up and I had it scrolled down to the middle, and so the question I asked was out of order. So I'm going to
Oh
go back.
no.
I'm going to go back up the top because I saw in the chat that you were putting them in the correct order to put the questions in
Oh,
there.
okay, cool. I
You
didn't.
you did it correctly, and I did not do it correctly.
Okay.
I should have scrolled back up. So the first question I should have asked, and the sentence leading up to that, I say, we've discussed how our childhoods are affected by these external controls from parents, institutions, government, society itself, and how it distorts our view of self. And when that happens, it changes our lives and not for the better. So the question out of that is, what do all these questions we ask on these broadcasts lead us to in the end? Are we changing? Are we growing? Does asking questions do any good? Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long lasting change? In other words, what difference does any of this make? Okay, so we'll go to the first one. What do all these questions we ask on the broadcast lead us to in the end? What do you think, Jen? What do all the questions that we ask, no matter who's doing the write up, whether it's Glenn or you or me or a combination, we ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, we do. I think it really, two things. I think it leads us to understand ourselves better, and get to know ourselves better.
Yeah,
Which honestly, I think there's a lot of depression and anxiety that's attached to that very thing, of people not knowing who they are, or
right.
what they want, or why they're
Oh,
here.
yeah,
All these really deep questions that give you purpose and meaning. And there's a lot of people that just kind of coast through life, like Janet mentioned, autopilot,
Yes.
and we just don't know ourselves. And that can very much leave you feeling empty. But the other thing, and did I forget? Oh, with us asking the questions on these broadcasts, it helps us learn more about each other. And that's
Yeah.
another huge part, connection, fellowship, whatever you want to call it.
Wow. That's great.
I can't tell you, through talking with you and Glenn and now like Jamie and Annie and other people from the chat and getting to know people and getting to know things about their struggles or their story. There's so much we can glean from each other, even if
Yeah.
they're different. I mean, there's things we can learn from people that have walked
Yes.
similar paths,
Yeah.
but gosh, I've learned a lot from people that even differ. And just like Glenn, differing in beliefs. I've
Yep.
learned so much from him, and it's priceless. It really is.
I completely agree. I mean, I've learned quite a bit by having a relationship with Glenn. But one of the things, and I've mentioned this before, but one of the broadcasts that we did, and I believe Glenn did the write up on that one, but it was about um, putting God in a box. That had the most
Yeah.
effect on me because I felt convicted of that, and
Hmm.
I, I don't I don't feel like I was totally putting them in a box, but when I thought about the beliefs that I had grown up with, and what the church teaches and things like that, um, in 2017, when I was taking care of Grandma, I was really in a place where I had a lot of time to look into all these things, and a lot of the things that I was taught, I by reading scripture and by studying these things more, since I had the time, there were a lot of beliefs that I kind of tossed off to the side, because of that. Reading it for yourself is very, very different than just believing what churches teach. And it was, talk about a revolution. It was definitely a revolution for me. But getting back to the point, Glenn had a lot of good things to say about, God shouldn't be in a box, and I agree with that. Um, I agree with that completely, and I think that a lot of people do put him in a box. They want their God to be what they think he should be, and am I guilty of that in some ways? Yeah, I think maybe I was. In fact, Scripture itself talks about, he allowed himself, he allowed his people to build him a temple, but that temple was a place that he visited. It didn't contain him, doesn't contain God. Uh, but I think we still do that. So what in the world?
Can you
Okay.
still see it? I actually reported it and took it off.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, Jen. We've never had that, so
Mm-mm.
that's the first time that I ever remember having
Some kind
that
of a
issue.
troll. Somebody's bored. I think Janet hit the nail on the head.
Wow. Okay.
This is definitely not the group.
Yeah, we don't get trolls, so that was interesting. Okay. All right. Anyway, the point I was trying to make, based on your point, Jen, was that we don't have to agree with people all the time to learn something from him, and I
Yes.
wish that more people understood that. I watch videos from atheists, and I watch videos from people that call themselves Christians, but they believe something differently. I feel like I can learn from them, and there are people that say, "Oh, you shouldn't listen to people if they're not teaching what you believe." And that's okay. There are people that can't watch any of that. But my faith is strong, and I'm not going to watch a video or a teaching from someone else and then go, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go with that." Um, but it might provoke some thought. It might provoke thought that makes my faith even stronger. So whatever the topic is, I think there's value in talking to someone that doesn't agree 100% with everything that you believe and think. Um, yeah. Okay. So I'll answer this one next. What do all the questions we ask on these broadcasts lead us to in the end? I put in the write up that I hope that it leads to self evaluation, and that once the evaluation happens, I really hope it leads to change. change and growth, and recovery and revolution, even if it's a self-revolution. And I love the word. I love just saying it. And when I was picking a song for tonight, I mean, I just typed in revolution songs, and there are so many. So this topic is one that people talk about, and there's even one by Depeche Mode, Personal Revolution. I mean, obviously, I didn't choose that one, but Ziggy Marley, he had a song about revolution. Now, a lot of these are about a political revolution, revolution against our oppressors in the larger world, but it's still the same. Whether it's I'm distracted by this.
I'm taking care of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know you are. I know you are. So this topic of revolution is one that people have sung about and talked about, for a very, very long time. So at least people understand what the word means. So where do all these broadcasts lead? I hope to self-evaluation. I hope to growth and change, and I hope it helps people have some sort of freedom in this world and freedom in their own lives. That's what I hope. What do you think, Glenn? What do all these questions? Because you're the question asker.
The
Where do
king
all
of
the questions
questions.
we ask on the broadcast lead us to in the end? What do you think? What's your perspective on that?
I would hope to find your own peace,
Okay. Yeah.
That's good.
because let's face it, each of us has been, I'm sure, I would think everyone on here has lived in turmoil, and hopefully many have lived with peace, and they are such at opposite ends of the spectrum. My
Ooh, good point.
goodness, if you've
Yeah.
got peace, you're a long, long way ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, questions bring peace, hopefully. So it's whether you have the courage to ask the questions is probably relevant.
Ooh, yeah. Thank you, Glenn. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Jen, are we changing? We'll put these two together. Are we changing? Are we growing?
I know I am.
Yeah, you sure are.
And I see other people, that are in our chat and that we talk to. I
Yeah.
see them growing and changing, and I think that's awesome. Um, I sometimes forget how much courage it takes to ask questions of ourselves. And because, when somebody else asks you a tough question, you kind of have to re say it in your head, like ask yourself, I mean, don't you
Yeah.
notice that you do that? Like if somebody asks you, you know, uh, gosh, like, what are you afraid of? You turn around and you think, what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of courage to ask ourselves these questions and to answer them.
Yeah.
So I had a point and it's gone. I'm just, I'm just pointing out that it takes a lot of courage to ask questions, even to allow people to ask you questions. Because
Right.
I mean, you and Glenn asked me a lot of questions in the beginning, and I could have
Yeah.
said, you guys need to go take a hike off a cliff.
Yes, you could have. And sometimes Glenn asks so many questions, and I've shared this many times, so this is not news to anyone. I have come to understand why Glenn asks some what I would consider some repetitive questions, and I've explained, and he's talked about it himself, and we've talked about it. He's trying to get someone to really think about something, and it was frustrating for me in the beginning. And then so when I saw him asking you all these questions, Jen, I was like, Glenn, quit asking so many questions. uh, because I was worried. I mean, it was a short period of time, but I was worried that yeah, you're going to get scared off by all these questions, because I know that happens to people. They might start out really liking the questions, digging the questions, and they start to dig in, and then when they realize that it's digging too deep for them and it becomes painful, they abandon the adventure. They abandon the journey. 10 minutes, Glenn says. So we got 10 minutes before we can make the change.
All right.
So yeah, having the courage to answer the questions, to ask the questions, answer the questions, to dive in. And then when you see how difficult it starts to become, sticking with it, that takes courage too.
Yeah.
To not run away from what you're discovering. Um, and I have been in lots of group counseling situations. I was involved with two separate groups back in the early 90s, mid 90s, somewhere in there. And they were very beneficial. And there were people that came at the beginning, like the first group I was in, I think there was like 12 people. And little by little, as we dug deeper into our past traumas and childhoods, and did some role playing where someone would play the role of an abusive alcoholic father, and they would write down all these horrible things that were said to them as children, and they would relive that. We started to see the people not coming back. Sometimes it was just, oh, they weren't there the next week, but then they'd come back, and then they wouldn't be there for 2 weeks. And literally the first group that we were in started out with like 12 people, and we ended with 6. So half of the people, at least half of the people that started this journey. And did I talk to each person and ask them individually, like, why'd you stop coming? No, I didn't. But I've seen this happen, and I have talked to people that have quit, that seem to have abandoned this adventure of asking questions and self-evaluation. And really, in my opinion, it's fear. It's too difficult. It's, as my mother would say, hard yards. It gets too hard for them. We've talked about that on broadcast, the idea of fear as being a deterrent from diving into these things. And if it were up to me, I wouldn't allow that. I wouldn't take that as an answer from anyone. It is hard. It is hard to ask questions. It's hard to answer questions. It's hard to really take a deep dive into your childhood. And it's even hard to realize that if your parents seemed really great to you, and then when you grow up and you look into yourself and you realize, hey, I have some real dysfunction. This isn't about blame. It's not
Yeah.
about blaming your parents, and even these institutions and governments and all these things that I mentioned in the write-up. It's not about blaming them. It's about realizing that because they were run by imperfect people, that if you're unhappy with things that you're noticing in your life, that you can still do something about it. But you have to take a look and just be honest with yourself about who your parents were to you, and that maybe they made some really huge errors in raising you, because they're not perfect, and they carry the issues that their parents put on them. It really is a trickle down effect, in my opinion. Okay, so what are those questions? Broadcast list. Then, okay, are we growing and changing? I'll answer that one next. Thank you for your answer, Jen. Yes, I feel like I'll never stop growing and changing, and if I ever do, then I know something's wrong. I think we grow if we choose. If we, as Glenn said, we make the choice. If we choose to grow, if we choose to change, then that's what happens. And it's a continual thing. I don't know that there's anyone that just says, you know what, I've learned everything I need to learn, and I don't need any more growth or change. I mean, I hope that that's not the case. I mean, how would you ever stop growing and changing if you're a human in this world? How would you have all the information about yourself? And I hope that's just constant growth and change.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Glenn? Are we changing? Are we growing? What do you think?
I think we're changing, but I think I was thinking about your mum.
Oh,
and
good.
And how questions in themselves are no guarantee of anything. Just because someone asks great questions and
point.
you may think on them, you still
Right.
have to make that conscious decision that you're going to do something about it.
Wow.
And I was just, as I said, I was thinking about your mum, and I've had this conversation with her in the later years where I would say to her, well, look, you've done all this work. You not only asked the questions, you've just dug all this stuff out, but yet you still appear to be at the shallow end of the pool. And I'd say, why don't you go down the other end and jump in and just let it unfold?
Wow.
And she would say, well, I am in the deep end. And I'd say, no, you're not. So can you imagine that conversation, Chris?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
And then so if my perception was that she'd done all this work, but it didn't help her at the end of the day. A lot of so I'm not sure whether all this work is any guarantee of growth and change. You might be different, but whether you've grown from it is another question. I'm not
Wow.
sure. I'm just throwing it up as sort of a
Yeah.
nebulous thought.
Yeah,
Well,
some people might be feeling like they might be getting more educated about psychology or people, but
yeah.
are they truly changing deep down?
Well, that it's interesting you guys bring that up because the Bible even talks about that people that they're this group of people is described as people that keep taking in more knowledge, but always hearing, never learning, never really learning. And I think that's exactly what it's talking about. So so in the modern world, it would be a person that goes to all the self-help groups and does the groups and does the one-on-one counseling. They read all the books and they watch all the videos and they do all that. They're ever learning, or they're ever hearing, ever listening, ever searching, but never learning, never changing. So I believe it's possible. You can immerse yourself with all this information, but you don't take the necessary steps. There are acts that need to take place. There are actual changes in order for the change to come. I love that point, Glenn. So the questions are good, but in order for the growth to happen, in order for the change to happen, there have to be things that follow, not just asking the questions. I think that's a beautiful point. It's the same point that I've made about acts of service for me in talking. We've talked about love a lot on this channel, and someone saying, "Hey, I love you." I mean, that's great. Someone says, "I love you," but when they back it up with acts, they do things to show love. That works better for me, and that's just me. Not everyone's like that, I'm sure. But that is the case for me. So the same thing is true in revolution and recovery and growth and change, is that it's great to ask the questions, but there have to be some steps that follow. And we're going to get into that a little bit more.
We're about to end.
Oh, we're about to
I mean,
end.
not end, but to
Okay,
click back
so
on.
we're going to make the change over now, guys. So there'll be a brief moment of silence and we'll be right back. So I hope that everyone can stick with us, and we'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Okay, thanks, guys. All right.
I have to link it up.
Mhm.
I'm going to the bathroom real quick, guys.
Okay.
We're going.
All right. Thank you guys for sticking around. That didn't take very long. Jen will be right back with us. I was looking in the chat because Annie had a good question, or a good statement, rather. Um, okay, here it is. So Annie says, how do you stop growing? People stop growing because they feel safe not growing further. I really agree with that a lot, Annie, and that's kind of what I'm talking about, said in a different way. Um, we've talked about people feeling comfortable, and people on the outside that see someone going through an abusive relationship. If they have this perception of someone else, and they look at how they're being talked to or how they're being treated, it might be easy for them as being on the outside to say, how can you continue to live in that scenario? Um, but when someone sees how difficult it is in some cases to extricate yourself from an abusive relationship, it may seem like to that person that it's easier to stay in it. There's a comfort, especially if they don't do the self evaluation, and they don't look into themselves and realize that they they sort of, in some ways, and I know this is controversial, but they asked for it. There's something about them that was broken enough to allow someone, an abusive person, to draw them in, so to speak. Um, so this the thing that Annie is saying here, there's a comfort in it. That's the point. How do you stop growing? People stop growing because they feel safe not growing further. I've experienced this too, where I have gotten to a place where like in counseling, or like understanding more about myself. There's actually a time when I said, "Okay, I've learned everything I need to learn. I'm good." And I did the same thing with scripture. I had grown up in a Christian school and gone to church most of my life. And there was a point, and I've talked about this before, that I came to where I said, "Well, I'm good. I don't need to continue learning. I've learned everything." And I thought I was good on doctrine and thought I had all the understanding. It's a ridiculous thing for someone to think, especially about the Bible, because the Bible is multi-layered, and it's living. It's a living word, in my opinion. So, in other words, it changes. Something that you read 10 years ago is going to have a different meaning to you because you change too. So, when you're reading something like that, um, it can morph into something else. Um, yeah. So there's a comfort, like Annie is saying. There's a comfort, and some people get to the place where they feel like they've progressed enough. So, other than just the fear that I mentioned earlier, it can be just a person thinking that they've arrived enough. They don't need to make any further change. Um, and then Annie also says, learning, it still goes back to being responsible for making the choice and changing for ourselves. Yeah, that is an important thing, to change for yourself. I think Jen was saying earlier, that when other changing, regardless of whether other people change along with you. I think that's what you said, wasn't it, Jen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're doing it for other people, then I don't think that you can keep that up. If you're changing for someone else,
Yeah.
I don't think you can keep that up. I don't think that brings the effectual, long-lasting change that we would hope.
Yeah. And sometimes for me, it was wanting permission from
Right.
other people to change.
Right.
It's like, no, 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 no.
No, 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 no. Jamie adds to the narrative here. She says, "You can stop growing when you just plain get tired of it. It can be exhausting." Yeah, it can be. I've had times when I have been looking into a particular topic where I just am scouring all the information that's available out there. I mean, things are so much easier. I mean, back in the day before the internet, you'd have to go to the library and check out all these books, or sit in the library and stack the books up. And I've done this in the past. Stack all the books up and go through them one by one. Now, most times I did that, it was because I had a paper to write or something. But I have gone a few times before the internet existed and looked into a particular topic. I remember I was interested in certain bands, so I would go to see if there was any information that I could find about musical bands and things like that. But now everything's at the tip of your fingers. It's on your phone, it's on your desktop, it's on your laptop, it's on your iPad or whatever. You can pretty much, you have a wealth of information at your fingertips. So when you dive into individual topics, you can get tired. Yeah, it's happened to me. I'm just like, okay, I got to take a break. I'm just tired of it. And I don't think that's exactly what Jamie means. She's saying you can also stop growing when you just plain get tired of it. So she's saying getting tired of the growing, but it just made me think of when you're diving into topics, even for self-evaluation, you can get tired of it. And so, why wouldn't you get tired of growing? I would hope that someone would push through that, though. It can be exhausting, yes, but if you push through the exhaustion and know that it's important and make that choice, as Glenn was saying, you make the choice to change. I think that you get a second wind. I really do. Okay. So back to the questions. Are we changing? Are we growing? Did everyone answer that one? Yes, I think so. Glenn, does asking questions do any good?
I think the real question is, does asking questions do any harm?
I don't think so. I can't think of a scenario.
It could push someone away. If you've got people like you were just saying about you and Glenn.
Yeah.
I could have told you guys to take a flying leap off of a cliff.
But that wasn't the question that did that, was it? It was you made a decision to do it.
Yeah.
To answer the questions.
To walk. You had the choice: stay or go.
Yeah.
Question
definitely.
didn't do it.
No.
You made the decision.
But in the question of could questions cause harm, I think people that are trying to do good by asking questions could push. Well, I guess it's not them pushing the person away; it's the other person choosing to walk away from the questions and the question
there's
askers.
obviously a degree of sensitivity that's got to be applied in situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that surely is obvious. So the question asker needs to be aware of try to be aware of the circumstances as well. I mean, you just don't go and ask, someone who's just lost their child, well, how do you feel? As a question.
My gosh.
But you see this on TV.
Yeah.
Oh, they stick a microphone in front of your face. Oh, how do you feel today? And your kid's just got run over by a truck. I mean, it's a disgrace. That's the kind of thing I think we should be revolting against.
I agree completely. And we've done broadcasts about that, actually talked about the things that people say to someone who's, lost someone recently, and God just needed another angel, things like that. We've discussed that, but it's read the room, know the time to ask the questions, for sure.
Yeah.
But in your situation, Jen, I'm glad that you didn't run away. But yeah, the point you're making, people could do that, but then you talked yourself out of your own point by saying that they decide whether to stay or go. So that would lead someone to the idea that there's nothing wrong with the questions. If the person runs away, they're not ready. They're not ready to answer the questions.
Yeah. So
in that way, does asking questions do any good? And Glenn flipped it over like he often does. Does it do any harm? I don't think that it does. I think the only harm that would happen if the person ran away, it would just mean they're not ready. It's not harmful, just maybe harmful to them if they're delaying their revolution or delaying their recovery. That would be the harm. It would be self-harm in a way.
But Cripps, also, I remember saying to Jen, if you want to go to this place of basically really going deep, it's going to hurt. I told you,
Yeah,
I
you
said
did
that to
warn
Jen.
me.
I warned her. I said, this will be tough. And then we would have conversation. I would keep saying to you, Jen, stop, 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 incessantly. Every time you say something that would be, would require a question. Just put it that way. It must have been incredibly exasperating for Jen to do that, but she toughed it out. Many people wouldn't have that fortitude.
That is a fact. That is a fact. And some people don't. As I've said, we've had some people come around in the past, and they seem at first to really be into the answering the questions that are being asked, and they hang around for a while, and it even seems like, hey, they're really taking off with this. It really seems like they're willing to do the hard yards and really diving in, and then they disappear and they don't come back, and that's okay. It means they're not ready. What I hope it means is maybe they're ready. Maybe they're done answering the questions. Maybe they're asking themselves their own questions. They don't need anyone else. I hope that's true. All I know is that, I've seen that happen where someone, at first, they seem to be excited about answering the questions, and then something happens. So I can't say I know exactly what that is. All right, Jen, does asking questions do any good? What do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually. And I remember feeling very fortunate that I had people come into my life that asked me hard questions.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think I could be where I'm at today if I hadn't had people come into my life that asked me some really hard questions, which in turn helped me ask myself those hard
Yeah.
questions. And to really look at the answers.
Yeah.
It just really uncovered a lot of things that I needed to look at in
Yeah.
order for things to change. And I was so at the end of my rope, I was about to go insane. It's just
Yeah.
a very unfortunate situation that I felt there was no way out of. I
Right.
really and truly, I had succumbed to just, what's the word? I just accepted my fate. I just accepted that this was going to be the rest of my life and looked forward to dying. Like, I mean, that's
Resigned.
how bad it was. Yeah, resigned.
Resigned to
Perfect
your
word.
fate. Yeah.
So, gosh, I feel like angels sang when, when I had people come into my life and ask questions. And I did have a counselor that asked some really good questions, but when I compare his question asking and
Yeah.
the amount of, or the lack, I'll say, the lack of
Right.
these questions
Right.
comparative to Glenn, it was like rapid fire machine gun.
Yeah. Right.
But it was
Exactly.
so good. It was so good. I was so primed and ready.
Yeah.
I don't believe in coincidence. I really don't. I think
Right.
I just was, it was the perfect timing to come across a friend that was bold enough to ask,
Yeah.
could see my situation from the outside
Yep.
and ask some really tough questions.
Well, that's one thing. You could say a lot of things about Glenn, but one of the things you can't say is that he is afraid to ask the questions. He's afraid to. I'm saying you can't say that about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very bold, our friend Glenn.
Very bold. Yeah. And it's helpful for those people that are ready. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I was only taking a leaf out of your mother's book. I mean, I owe her the biggest debt of gratitude. Basically, she saved my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm only hopefully what comes around or what goes around comes around. Hopefully, I can share some of what she gave to me with some other people.
I mean, that's true, and that's why when you were asking the questions, that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of my mother asking these questions over and over and over again, because she did it to me too. And I'd be like, "Why are you asking me that?" Because sometimes, oh gosh, I love her. I really, really love her, and I miss her a lot. But I don't miss some of the questions that she would ask. Like, she would ask questions sometimes. I'm trying to think of an example. Oh, so the cable guy came by and fixed our cable, but he was having a hard time, and he had to go get a special tool and come back and fix it later. So she'd say, "Well, how did he feel about that?" I'd be like, how did the cable guy feel about having trouble connecting our cable? I don't know. How would I know how the cable guy felt? I would never think to ask the cable guy how he felt about having difficulty connecting. I mean, that seems ridiculous, I'm sure, to people listening, but that's the kind of question she asked. She really wanted to know how everyone felt about things. She wanted to know. The other example I've used before is the difference between. I mean, it's not true in every case. The difference between the kind of questions women usually ask, like when someone calls and said, "Oh, so and so had their baby," and they'll say, "Oh, well, how long was it?" You know, for a guy, that just all they need to know is, was it a boy or a girl?
Is
Is
it
it
alive? Is it okay?
is it okay? Is it healthy? And that's it. That's all they need to know. But sometimes the woman wants to know, well, how much did it weigh? How long is it? You know, do they have a name yet? You know, there just are a lot more questions
Yeah.
because, as they say, the people that study these things, they say that a woman's vocabulary I mean, they use way more words in a day than men do. Like I said, that's not true for everyone, but there it is. Um, that's really not the topic, though.
Hey, Chris,
Uh,
but I've got a story for you. I'm not sure
okay,
if you've
good.
Ah,
heard it. I'm not sure if you've heard this one. But as you know, your mum and I were staying in her apartment in Charlotte, and we
Yep.
went down to the supermarket. Uh, and she said she was standing by the meat section or whatever it was there, and she said, "What do you want for dinner?" And I said, "Oh, I don't care. You pick something. I'm easy." And she started shouting at me. She calling me F this and I asked you a question, you didn't. You were not prepared to pick something for dinner. I thought I'm trying to crawl under the shelves. She's exploded. What have I done? So in the end,
I
I went to the meat cabinet and picked something out and threw it in the bloody trolley or whatever it was. You know, it was, what?
I wonder what triggered her about that you didn't make a stand about your meat choices,
That I
or
didn't declare myself,
right,
probably. I'll
right.
tell you what, I never forgot that. I thought, oh, and now I'm doing that to other people, which just makes it even more makes it worse.
Oh, the
Declare
irony.
yourself.
That's right. Declare yourself. That's it.
Anyway, that's my story.
That's great. Thank you. I love that. I'd like to say hello to Journey's Wake and also to Joel, who popped in while we were talking. Journey's Wake and More Than a Flame, welcome. Glad that you guys are here. All right. I love stories about my mother, and I know, Glenn, you've shared a lot with me, things that I didn't know. Some of them, um, some of the correspondences, my mom would share them with me. Things that, I mean, I'm sure not everything, but when my mom died, Glenn was kind enough to share some of the correspondence with my mom that he had, and there was a lot in those, a lot of healing and a lot of growth for me to see her words written to Glenn and to see his words written back, and to get a better idea of their relationship in that way. It was very healing to me, so I'll always appreciate that. Okay, so does asking questions do any good? You guys really had good answers on that. We kind of went off track a little bit, maybe. Um, but it's all for the good of answering the question. Does asking questions do any good? I can't really do better than you two did. I'll just say that I agree with how you characterize that, and I would say that asking questions is always good. That's the bottom line for me. I don't have anything more to say about it than that. That's where I stand on that one. Okay, so here's a good one. And I'll ask Glenn this first, so be ready, Glenn. Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long lasting change?
Would you mind repeat that, please?
Oh, certainly. Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long lasting change?
Good question.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is. I can see it. Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long-lasting change? You know, it can. But I
Okay.
don't think it's any guarantee. I mean, just oh, gee, that is such a multi-pronged question.
Sure.
I mean, I think you have to make the assumption that we know ourselves well to really be able. I'd say if we do know ourselves well, I think it can lead to long-lasting change. But I think that if you pull up stumps once you think you know yourself, you're probably not going to change any more than you are right in that moment.
Right.
So I think it's a continual process. It's just the whole thing is just always unfolding, and
Yeah.
you got to be prepared to be there.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
I also say hello to Nathan. I didn't say hello to him earlier, so Nathan's here with us, and I'm glad you're here. Nathan, I hope you're doing well. And Nathan's answer to the question is nope. So Nathan, we love your one word answers, but if you would like to fill in why you're saying nope, I would love to hear your answer to that. Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long-lasting change, Jen? What do you think?
I think it depends. I think there's a potential that somebody can know themselves and still decide not to change.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
I think our hope would be that someone can get to know themselves and recognize that all of us need places and areas in
Yeah,
ourselves that need change.
yeah,
Especially if we're in situations that we don't like. If we know
right.
ourselves, and it can lead to changing that, and
Yeah,
could potentially even change who we are. Because I mean, if you're in a situation where you're miserable,
yep.
getting to know yourself, and then within that journey, figuring out, okay, I have more choices than I was originally led to believe.
Isn't that the case a lot of times for
Yeah,
people? They don't realize they have choices until later, and then when you're looking at your life, and well, like Jen, you said you met some people that helped you come to the realization that you did have a choice, that you didn't have to just stay in this abusive, horrible place where before you'd felt like you didn't have a choice. In fact, you've even said tonight that you were resigned to your fate, so to speak.
yeah,
So, how many other people feel that way? I don't expect you to come up with a number, Jen, but
I'm
I'm
sure a lot.
sure a lot of people feel like they don't have a way out or they can't see a way out.
Yeah,
So, in my opinion, it would require doing some research and trying to, not just say, "Hey, I don't have a choice," but um, you might have to do some digging. I mean, nobody found any treasure. Nobody just stumbled across buried treasure. The term "buried" means it's under the ground. It's not laying up there where everyone can just walk on by can find it. You have to
yeah.
dig for it sometimes. So that's true about recovery. You have to dig. So in terms of this, Annie says in answer to that question, yes, we're able to connect more fully with others when we do. Life is enriched. So that's her answer to the question. Does knowing ourselves lead to effectual, long lasting change? That's a good answer, Annie. Thank you. So Annie thinks that when we know ourselves, we're able to connect fully with others. So it is a life enrichment. That's a good point. Jamie says, I have to say no to this one. Plenty of people, quote, know, unquote, themselves, but choose not to change. That's a good point, Jamie. That's kind of what Jen was saying. So there has to be something that follows the knowing. I forget which philosopher said, know thyself. Maybe it was Socrates that said that. So even in in the secular world, there are people that feel like there's value in knowing yourself. But I would agree that it's not enough just to know yourself. You have to do something about it. I think it is the first step. Learning to know yourself is incredibly important. I mean, how do you realize anything's wrong if you don't know yourself a little bit? But I think these things can go hand in hand. Knowing yourself, asking the questions, things like that. We'll say hello to BB Truth, who just popped in. Welcome, BB. We're glad that you're here. Hope you're doing well. It's good to see you. Good to see you too.
I think
All right.
Jamie made a good point, or
Okay.
a point for discussion rather than necessarily what I would necessarily agree. She said some choose to expect others to accept them as they are. This is who I am, so deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, what's the problem with that?
They don't have to deal with it if they don't want to.
That was quick, Jen. You didn't have to do any thinking about that one, did you?
Nope.
Well,
But I'm not
do
sure
you
that's the
expect
answer.
someone to? Do you have an expectation that people accept you as you are?
I used to. Now I'm like, they're either are or they aren't, and that's of no consequence to me
Mm,
because I accept me.
So, in
wow.
other words, if they say, "Well, I don't accept you, Jen," well, you're going to say, "Well, you can bugger off."
Yeah.
Yeah, or I respect your decision not to accept me, but I accept me, and that's all I need. So thanks for the
Well,
input.
well, we
On with you.
we can shut it down now. That's all we need to talk about right
Or
there.
take a running, flying leap off that cliff over there.
Yeah. Take a long walk off a short pier. That's one of my favorites.
You can get, what is it? You can get mad with the same face. No, you can get happy
Yeah.
with the same face you got mad with.
Yeah, that's another one. I love
I
that one
love that.
too.
Yeah, that one's good.
That one came from a guy that worked for my dad for many years. His name was Kenny, and he had a lot of isms that he would say, and that was one of them. Yeah, he can get, and usually it was in reference to my dad. Like he would be late to work, and I would say, "Well, Val's not going to be happy that you're late." And he said, "Well, he can get happy with the same face he gets mad with." He can say that all the time. Oh, that's great. Uh, okay. So does does knowing ourselves late? Okay, everyone answered that one, and I'm going to skip the next one in the series, which is what difference does any of this make? And I'll just say, um, I think it makes a lot. All these questions, all the things that we're talking about, the growing, the changing, the long-lasting change, effectual. Uh, the difference it makes is a difference in your life. That's the difference it makes. When you have the courage to change something, realize that you're not happy with the way things are, and you make the choice to change, as difficult as it may be. Everything that you do makes a difference. Anything you do striving for change in your life, anything you do makes a difference, I think. Okay, scrolling down to the bottom. Okay, a call to revolution, not in this world, but in our lives. How do we start? How do we start? What steps do we take? What do you think, Jen? How do we start? How does a person start this journey?
I think one of the first steps truly is realizing that you have a choice, and or not just a choice, but choices,
Multiple.
multiple.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing I was going to say, how do we start?
How do we start, and what steps do we take when we put those two together?
I think also, as we mentioned at the top of the show, that realizing or recognizing that you can't change other people, that you can only change yourself. I think sometimes that can be a little bit of a relief because, okay, say for the world going crazy or whatever, when you're thinking about all this stuff that just seems so much bigger than yourself and you think I only have control over myself, how am I going to make any kind of change or any dent
Right.
and the bigger stuff that's going on. When you do recognize that the only person that you have control over, the only thing that you have control over is yourself,
Right.
I think it is a little bit of, of a weight that's taken off. I hear a lot from guys that this whole idea of guys like to fix things. My
Yeah.
ex said this a lot. Like he didn't want to know about all the bad stuff going on in the world because his excuse was, well, I can't do anything about it.
Uh,
And I've heard that a lot from people,
right.
not just men, women too. There's nothing I can do about it. So why even why dig into it? Why learn about it? Why even know it's there?
Wow.
Which is kind of a bummer.
It is a bummer. It's sad. It's sad.
But I get it at the same time. I get it. But again, it's hitched to that whole thing again of we can only change ourselves. So there is, I mean, that's not an easy feat per se.
No, no.
Easier than changing the entire world, but I know
Yeah.
sometimes it could feel like the weight of the world's on your
Yeah.
shoulders, you know. But yeah, definitely recognizing that you have a choice, not just one, but multiple choices, and that you can only change yourself is a big one.
Yeah.
And then asking yourself questions like, okay, say hypothetically you're in a situation and you're like, okay, this sucks. This is really not healthy. I'm
Right.
miserable.
Right.
Ask yourself questions. Okay, what do I have control over? What is it?
Yes.
What can I change that could make this situation better?
Mm.
What can I do? And be realistic about it and be honest about it. And yeah, that's a good start, I'd say.
Well, Jen, the Serenity prayer that people do in AA and Al-Anon and other 12-step groups is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's all it is. It's a really, really short thing that they say at the beginning and end of, I'm not sure every meeting, but every meeting I've ever been to. That's the Serenity prayer. And there's wisdom in that. So grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's huge. And if everything else is horrible about 12-step groups, that's the one thing that I think that there's a lot of gold in there. I think it's important to know that there are some things you can't change. There are things that they're just the way that it is.
Yeah.
I mean, like for instance, and this is probably stupid, but you can't change who your parents were. You can't change your childhood. There are things you can't change about it. What happened is what happened. There's nothing you can do. As you said earlier, you can't get in the time machine and go back and prevent something from happening.
Yeah.
The past is the past. It's in the review mirror. It's done. You can't change anything. But can you change the effect that those things had on you in your current existence? Yes, you can. I believe you can. Um, so how do we start? And thank you for your answer, Jen. How do we start and what steps do we take? I like yours, realizing that there's a problem, realizing that you don't like the way things are is a good place. Making a choice, and at what point does the choice enter in? I don't know. It's probably different for different people, but
Yeah.
I would say that realizing that you're fed up with your situation, getting sick of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's a good place. Some people start there. Some people start by meeting someone that looks at their life and says, "Hey, are you okay with this? Are you okay with the way you're being treated?" I mean, sometimes that can happen. Um, to me, how do we start and what steps do we take? Anything that helps you get out of the place you're in if you decide that you don't want to be there anymore. We've mentioned several times there are resources out there. If you're in an abusive situation, there are groups that you can join that I feel like are very valuable. That's how we met Annie, the group that Jen is involved in. We've talked about it on the show before, Victorious Voices, and you can find that on Facebook. Even I have gone over there and I've gotten a lot of value on just seeing what people have gone through, and Jen has really been helpful to a lot of people over there and just telling her stories and responding to other people. She's really good at that. And people seem to really enjoy that. Someone that's commenting on their story and encouraging them. That's valuable. And I would say that there's healing in that for you, to be involved in someone else's story. You can learn from that. The 12-step groups, they help in that way too. When you go, maybe you're not as bad as your story isn't as bad as other people's story, but when you hear other people tell their story of what they've been through, 9 times out of 10, you can get something out of that.
Yeah.
So literally a step that you can take is joining a group And whatever it is that you're dealing with, joining a group of other people who are going through the same thing or similar things, that is a huge step. There are books to read. There are self-help books. There are counseling books. There are programs on YouTube. I mean, I would be very, very careful about what you take in on YouTube, because there are a lot of people that just put a tile up. They're a life coach. I've talked about this before. It's so infuriating, and they have no degree. Now, having said that, Glenn doesn't have a degree either, but he's still able to be helpful because he has life experience. So I'm not saying everyone that doesn't have a degree has nothing good to contribute.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that they're really easy to spot. I mean, you can see their narcissism coming through on their videos. You can really spot it when they go on and on about what a great life coach they are. And I've helped so many people. When I hear someone say how many people they've helped, that's the first indicator to me that there's something wrong. It shouldn't be about how many people you help. Just help people. You don't have to say how many people you've helped. That's
No
fine.
need to boast.
No need to boast. It's boasting. That's what it is, babe. Bottom line, babe. Let's get right to the bottom of it. Okay. So I just mentioned a few. It's not exhaustive, but how do we start and what steps do we take? What do you think, Glenn? How do we start? Let's put these two together. How do we start this journey toward revolution, if that's what we're all talking about here, this topic? How do we start and what steps do we take?
Yeah, well, I've got a situation here which I think is relevant to the word revolution, and it involves taking what you know into the world. Now, my situation is that I had a conversation with someone on the weekend, or no, a few days ago anyway, and we agreed verbally to what would you call it? To made a verbal decision. This is how something was going to work.
Right.
And then 2 days later, that person comes back and says something totally the opposite. Now, trying to deal with people. So for me, the revolution is really don't compromise your integrity when you have to deal with people who have none.
Ooh, I'm going to write that down. Don't compromise your integrity when you're dealing with people that have none.
So that's a revolution in my mind in itself. If we can take ourselves into the world and behave in a way that basically incites the quiet revolution.
Right.
Not an overt one where
That's
you pick
good.
up weapons, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Demonstrate
your actions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Annie says, again, taking personal responsibility for taking a step toward making a difference for yourself. No one makes me change. Only I can do this. Wow, that's great. I would agree. With that. And Annette says, I really need someone to give me practical help, but I don't have that person. I hear you, Annette. You do have people that care about you for sure. So let's try to talk offline, and maybe we can get a better idea of what you think you need. And we're always here to help in any way we can. So I know it may feel like you don't have any person to give you practical information. So let's talk more about that. I would love to. I'm not saying I can help, but there are a lot of people on the panel and in the chat. There are a lot of people I'm sure would be at least be willing to hear what's going on. And I know some things that you've talked about before, but as we said earlier, it may seem like there's no way out, but I think there always is a way out. Even if it seems hopeless, I think there's a way out. Okay, so there's that. Okay, on this one, how do we start? What steps do we take? Glenn answered that. I think we all answered that, didn't we?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Can we really change anything? Jen, can we really change anything? Is it possible to really change anything? And I think that this seems like a silly question in a way, But I think there's people that think that they can't change, or they've been given the impression. I mean, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I mean, that's a saying for a reason. That people get set in their ways. I've heard this said about people my whole
Yeah.
life, especially older people. Well, that's just the way your dad is, or that's just the way grandpa is, and it's almost like other people make excuses for the person to not do anything to change it. I know even my own dad, obviously as his children and my mother, she wanted him to change and he wouldn't. So she left twice. I mean, she even went back to him, and it blows my mind that there wasn't an expectation of my mother for him to, hey, let's do some counseling first, or let's do some things to find out if you've matured, because he really hadn't. He hadn't done anything to change. It's just that my mom had gotten to the point where, I mean, there were many reasons why she decided to go back to him, and not many of them good, in my opinion, but it was what she decided to do. So I had to be supportive of her, even though I didn't think it was a good idea. But where was I? So there was no requirement on my mom's part, that no proof of change, which I would have had to have had. I would have had to have seen some change if I was going to entwine my life with someone where it didn't work before. So I don't know what she was thinking in that realm. Can we really change anything? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we can. I know I have changed, and I have witnesses, and that's not bragging. I'm just saying people that knew me before and know me now. I'll use my friend Marcus, for example. I have known Marcus since I was 7 and he was 5. He's 2 years younger than me, and we remain friends, despite being separated for a while and not talking, then running into each other more than once. But this time around, as adults, we have remained in contact. And he knows me from the early 90s, when I was a very different person in a lot of ways. And I didn't always treat him well. Nothing horrible, but some things that I regret. And he and I have talked about it. And he has been very forgiving of me and understanding that, because the reason why he's understanding, and he has said this to me, is because he can tell that I am a different person. I have worked on myself. I have grown. I have changed. I didn't like parts of who I was, not the whole of who I was, but parts, the way I treated people sometimes. I had some selfish desires. I made some choices that I was only thinking about myself and not thinking how it would have affected other people, in this case, Marcus. And I did things that I regret. So this is one example of a person that I still talk to that has seen change. So in my own life, I know that it's possible to change. It might be hard. It might seem impossible, but my answer to this is yes, we can change. What do you think, Jen? Can we? I mean, you said yes already, but you want to fill in that?
No.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. I think as long as we're alive, there's always possibility of changing things,
I agree.
changing who we are. Sometimes it's even changing our perspective. Like, I'll just share your story, which bled into mine. But
Mhm.
you've been working for a roadside assistance company that
Yes.
is sort of a company that's in a way abusive
Yeah.
to their employees.
Yes. I'm glad you brought it up, because here's the reality. I am in an abusive relationship with someone I work for. That's absolutely accurate.
But what I was going to share was one thing that I feel like God led you to change. And I don't, maybe you could share more of how this actually came about, but you started having the perspective of working that particular, because it was hard. You were getting
Yeah.
really run down, I think, emotionally
Mhm.
and physically, even dealing with this unfortunate company. And
Yeah.
you got to the point where you changed your perspective. God changed your perspective
Yeah.
of working as unto the Lord, like Scripture says, and
Yes.
letting the work of your hands and the job that you do, doing it to the best of your
Yes.
ability,
Wow.
because you love helping people,
I do.
and it just revolutionized how you were dealing with that particular job,
Wow.
which really inspired me. It's inspired me. Not that I love my job; it's very
Mhm.
different from yours.
Mhm.
But I think I had days where I was like, "Arr."
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you and I do our devotions every morning, we pray and we ask
Yeah.
God to help us in that area to work as unto Him,
Yeah.
and let our work be a way to glorify Him and a way
Yes.
to give back to Him and
Yeah.
a way to show our appreciation and love, and not just to Him, but to each other and our family
Yeah.
and even the people that we work for.
Wow.
So,
Well,
yeah,
thank you. That,
yeah,
wow, I didn't see that coming, but that was a really, really great point. I will just fill that in. You're absolutely right. So this company that I work for is abusive. They like a lot of companies, they don't care about their employees. They only care about money. And they say they care about people on the side of the road, but ultimately they don't. I mean, it's obvious to me, if they cared about the customer on the side of the road, they would do more to keep the people happy that are actually doing the job of picking them up and getting them somewhere safe. They say don't leave anyone stranded. Well, I'm not the one that's leaving them stranded. Your systems that are faulty are what's leaving someone stranded, because I'll just say briefly, I could go on a long rant. I could do a whole broadcast about all the problems that I see, but when you don't pay so I do roadside assistance. So I'm helping people that break down on the side of the road. So one of the problems, just one of them, mind you, is that they have tow truck companies that go under contract with them. They pay them very little. And if it's a more complicated tow, let's say the car is lowered, someone has got low profile tires. Well, that's more difficult to get back on the back of a truck. It's more difficult to tow. So they should be paid a little extra in that particular scenario, but there's no extra being paid. And they used to have a phone line that the service provider, that's what they're called. The tow truck companies are service providers, that they could call if they had a problem getting paid, or if they had a question, or they wanted to update something. They used to be able to call and talk to someone. Well, the company discontinued that. And I don't know all the reasons why they discontinued it. All I know is that when I'm calling a service provider to try to get help for a customer who's stranded on the side of the road, and they say, "Oh, I don't do any work for this company anymore because I have had several instances where I didn't get paid." So they do the job and then they have trouble getting the money for the job that they already did. So when this is one of the issues with this company. And I saw really early on that there were a lot of abusive things for the employees. And it wasn't just me, it was talking to other people that have worked for the company for a while and seeing the turnover, seeing how many people I went to training with that are no longer with this company. Um, and it was wearing me out, just like Jen said. It was wearing me down. I could feel the vampire sucking of my resolve every day that I would go into and try to help people. And it was becoming very, very difficult. And I had shared this with Jen. I can share anything with her, and she's very understanding and she listens. And so I was complaining or venting to her about this company. And I remembered this, learning this from Scripture: work as unto the Lord. And I've never had to do it in the way that I've had to do it with this company in order to stay employed and continue to do my job, which, as Jen said, I really do like helping people. And I have to make a decision on another point. I have to make a decision that I can't work for an abusive company for a long period of time. I have to find something else. And I will. I will find something else. If I'm going to choose not to be in a personal relationship with someone that's abusive, why in the world would I choose to work for a company that's abusive and they don't care? And So anyway, I changed my perspective. Instead of thinking I'm working for this abusive company and looking at it the way I was before, I thought I'm trying to help people. I'm working for the customer, but ultimately I'm working as unto the Lord. I'm working as if I only have God to worry about. And may not work for everyone, but it worked for me. It changed the way I saw it. So every day when I would get up and log in, and the half an hour sometimes process it takes to sign in because you have all these safeguards in place, which I understand, and logging in. And then there's all these technical issues that continue to happen because their systems are faulty. So you get disconnected all the time, right? When you're in the middle of a call, it just disconnects and you're trying to help someone and you have to reconnect. And there's just all these frustrations. And it didn't happen overnight for me, but I started trying to look at it from a different perspective of not doing it for the company, but I'm doing it for in front of God. And I'm doing it because I have someone that I love and care about, and I have to bring in some money. It may not be that I have this job for a long time, but for now, it's what I have. And I'm not the type of person just to walk away from something if it's uncomfortable. And so while I look for something else, I have to figure out a way to do this in the short term. And that has worked for me. So hopefully that would be helpful to someone else who's in a difficult job. I've had other difficult jobs before, and I didn't really understand this this philosophy, if you will. I wish I had, because it might have really helped me get through some tougher situations. But I'll just say one more thing about this, and that is that, and I'm saying this to myself, an abusive situation is an abusive situation, regardless of the reasons why. If someone came to me and told me the same scenario that I'm presenting to you guys, and I'm not even telling you everything, I would tell them, yeah, you need to find something else. Don't remain in an abusive situation.
Yeah.
So I will heed that advice, and I will find something else. The good news is, I'll just say that the other company I work for, their busy season is about to start in mid-December, and then things change quite a bit, and I won't need this other company anymore. So I'll be able to do that for a while. Anyway, so that was really a long explanation to that one. So we'll try to move forward. And I think I saw 10 minutes. So we'll have to do one more change, but we can finish up. Okay, so can we change it? Did everyone answer the can we really change anything?
Did Glenn?
No.
Glenn, did you please answer? Can we really change anything? What do you think?
I really want to answer the first two. Can we really change anything, and can we reprogram? Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, but I want to just mention something about the reprogram. Annie had a conversation with her, would be quite recent, and she made a comment about connection, and
Okay.
I said it was in the form of a question, and one thing dawned on me is that even though I came from a pretty bad codependency and that rescuer mentality, even after more than 20 years, I'm still thinking about what I used to do as a reference point. So what I'm really saying is I don't think it helps to go into denial about what
Right.
one once was in order to be present in the moment.
Right.
So I think that when I was just kept referring, it helped me. I don't know whether it helps others, but
Wait, can you explain that a little bit differently, Glenn? Because I'm trying to grasp what you're saying and I don't understand.
okay. It says, can we change and can we reprogram ourselves? What I was saying was, I reprogram my attitude towards codependence and the way I behave towards people in terms of attempting to rescue them.
Ah, okay.
Right.
What I'm saying is that I'm mindful of I'm mindful of what I used to be now when I make the connections with people. to
Right.
Okay.
basically checking myself to make sure I'm not doing something that I did.
Right.
It's a bit like the alcoholic not wanting to go and take a drink.
Right.
So
So I'm
making
just,
sure you don't fall back into old programming.
Yes.
yeah, basically it's just like the reprogram requires also rechecking. See, you've got the program right.
Yeah. Reevaluating.
And
Exactly.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's good. Cause yeah, I think it's silly to think that we can change and not have moments of reverting back.
Yeah.
Annie and I talk about that a lot. I'll
Reverting.
catch myself. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to rescue somebody again. Shoot
Oh.
me.
But see how it can come across is that you're emotionally disconnected because you're trying not to get involved. But I just think when it
Oh.
comes to emotional connection,
Ah,
all that happens is that you're changing the way that you connect emotionally.
Right.
And it's
yes.
not the same as it used to be. You're not embedded in the connection with oh yeah, okay, this is an opportunity to rescue somebody. It's
Wow.
Yeah.
different. It's
Yeah.
more, whilst it's more distant, in many respects it's closer. It's almost paradoxical,
Mm.
but sometimes people don't see that it is actually close. It's actually closer than people perceive it, because people often have an idea in their head what they think a connection is, but what is for one person may not be for the other. So it's just as it comes down to attitude, acceptance. You can reprogram. Can There's only 4 minutes, so I'll go. Can we be free? Absolutely. Uh, I know that for myself. I'm free of that stuff. Can we have liberty in our own lives? I absolutely believe so. Like I call it peace or harmony or whatever, but it exists and we can have it. But my goodness, it didn't come easy. It never came. You don't waltz into this situation and wake up overnight and it's all good. No
No.
way.
Yeah.
You got to put in. So yeah, I've answered that.
Yeah.
So I'll let you move on. We got 3 minutes if you want me to change now or whenever.
Yeah. Let's go ahead. I think this is a good place to change. So let's go ahead and change now, and we'll be right back, guys. I appreciate your patience. We'll be right back in just a minute. We'll be a little bit after 10. I see Jen's comment. I think we'll finish up tonight a little over 10 p.m. our time, Eastern Standard Time. Yeah. So we'll come back in just a minute, and we'll go through the remaining questions, and we'll try to get you guys out of here not too late tonight. Okay. So just bear with us. Thank you. All right.
I'm here. I've just got to reconnect this.
Yep. Yep.
Ah, bugger. Okay, just got to put that on top, and I just got to reconnect it up. So, there's Jan and Long. Where are we? Say GZC. GZC. There it is. We're up and going.
Okay. Thank you guys for your patience. I appreciate that. So we'll just keep going. Can we reprogram ourselves, Jen? And do I need to explain what programming is, or do you feel like everyone understands what that is?
I think they understand.
Okay. So can we reprogram ourselves like a computer? Can we change what comes in and what comes out?
Yes. And I'm telling you guys, I feel like for the most part, it is difficult because for a lot of us, we're going against programming.
Yeah.
Like for me, it was 38 years of
Yeah.
programming. Um, but I truly believe that when you're consistently plugging away
Yes.
at changing yourself and getting healthier and like educating yourself,
Hmm.
and you've got a good support group, and you can clearly kind of see the dynamic and the skeleton of the old programming. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like be able to
Yeah.
really see it from an outside perspective and fully understand why it was wrong, why it was messed up, how it was affecting you.
Right.
It's hard, but it's possible. It's totally possible. Um, and then was there another part of that question? I think it was a couple
Well,
questions.
what Glenn did is he answered a couple. So he answered, can we reprogram ourselves? Can we be free? And can we have liberty in our own lives? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, those are the three that you answered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Cool.
go ahead and answer the next two,
Yeah.
Jen, if you like. Can we be free? Can we have liberty in our own lives?
Yeah. Can we be free? Yes. There is so much freedom that I've been experiencing and am currently experiencing because I've been breaking programming. And I'll just share with you guys
Yeah.
because I love sharing.
Yeah. I love your
um,
sharing.
right now, in the last few weeks, due to some help of some amazing women in my life, Annie and Jamie. I have come to realize that I have had my entire family on a pedestal my whole life. And I had no idea up until 2 weeks ago. And Annie and I got into this conversation about idols. And I was like, because Annie is just, both Annie and Jamie's minds are brilliant, I think. That's just my opinion. Um, and they've gotten all this wisdom from the journeys, their own specific journeys that they've walked. But I just in our discussing about what a pedestal is and what does that dynamic look like in relationships and friendships and stuff, and just recognizing that my family's opinion of me even trumped God's, which I had no idea that I had this dynamic like set
Wow.
up in my brain. And I don't think it was done on purpose.
No, no.
I just think through many thousands, if not millions, of different instances and things happening and things said and things not said and things done and things not done, I just came to really hold myself very much below my family and
Right.
looked up to them in some ways. Now, my whole life, I have had trouble making decisions, being terrified of making mistakes because of things my dad had done, and
Sure.
even things I had deduced in my own life from things I'd watched in my family dynamic, my family of origin. So I would run around, I've talked about this before, I would run around, take polls from people
Yeah.
because I felt like I just didn't trust myself and I didn't want to make mistakes. And I
Right.
think there were times that I thought, if I take so and so's advice and it screws up, then I won't be the one that's blamed.
Right.
I
Right.
won't get in trouble.
Yeah.
It's
Because
still my
you,
choice, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
it's just
someone
this.
else. Yeah. Because if you follow someone else's bad advice, then you can say, well, you told me to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was your idea.
Yeah.
So in my journey right now, and it's brick by brick, really and
Yeah.
truly, and it's fascinating. It's really fascinating the things that we come to believe about ourselves,
Yeah.
all of these different experiences through our lives
Right.
with ourselves and with the people around us. But it was a huge breakthrough for me because it explained so much. It explained why when my family is critical of me, or even when they ask me questions
Right.
about like my job or my husband's job, and
Right.
I'm always waiting somewhere inside me with this anxiety that they're picking me apart, that they're judging me, being critical. Now they might be.
Yeah.
I think there are times that they have been. I think there's other
Yes.
times where it's been innocent,
Right.
but I'm still seeing it through this lens of hurt and this lens of they're on a pedestal and I'm below
Yes.
them, and also still struggling with my programming of who my parents and my family see me to
Right.
be is who I am, which is not
Wow.
true. It's not true. I'm finding out who I am and who I want to be, but also in the context of God. Who does God say I am? So it's a huge, huge journey. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. But I'm telling you, even in these 2 weeks, as I've been talking to Annie and Jamie, there's still that old programming that wants to pop back up,
Yeah.
and it's so imperative, I think, for people to be in your life that can lovingly and kindly say, "Oh, you're doing it again," um, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even see this." I didn't even see that I was like sneaking back into this old way.
Sure.
So it's difficult, but you can be free. You can
Yeah.
break the programming. It takes a lot of work, and but it's worth it, because even though I'm still in the middle of this journey and I'm still in the middle of breaking down these pedestals, um and still even looking at it and seeing what this is and why it is, and why it needs to go away. All of these different questions bubbling around. I'm just still learning, but there is freedom even in the midst of the journey. It's not only at the end. There, as you're learning and as you're discovering things about yourself and about the people around you, and the lies you've believed about yourself so many years, and the things that God truly believes about you and the truth in that. There is such freedom in that, even in the middle of the journey or wherever you are on it.
Wow.
And I think even discovering all these things, it opens these doors to other choices, um, to where it's not so narrowed, and you think either I have no choices or only have one. So it opens a whole world of freedom. And realizing that your choices too, because I have felt out of control my entire life. And I don't mean out of control like I'm mentally breaking down, but just that I never had control over my life. Now, I think the old me found some comfort in that, because again, it goes back to, well, if a mistake is made, it's not my fault because I'm not in control of my life. Other people are.
Wow.
But to recognize, it is scary. It is scary to be in a place where you're like, okay, I am making the choices for me. I'm an adult. It can be scary, but it can be very empowering as well. To
Mm.
take back the reins from people or situations around you that have had the control, or that you've allowed to have the control, and realize I don't have to allow them anymore. I have a choice to have control
Mm.
over my life. So anyway, hope you guys followed
Wow.
that.
Yes.
All
Wow.
right.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for such a detailed answer, not being
Awesome.
sarcastic at all. That was beautiful. I think for me, the beautiful thing is to hear you talk about those things, the way you answered those questions, and hear you talk about the changes you've made. And I just want to make two comments. One is, you were talking about realizing through having this relationship with Annie and Jamie, and hearing you say, "Oh, I didn't even know I was doing that." That's what Glenn was mentioning, the reevaluating. That you need to keep reevaluating yourself to make sure you don't fall back into the old patterns. And I think it's so valuable to continue to have people around you. And we'll get to a question that kind of addresses that here in a minute. But when you are in this process, however you decide to go into it, once you've made the choice to do it, I think it's imperative to have checks and balances around you, and that can come in the form of having healthy people as friends, and that in and of itself can be a long journey, because there's in my opinion there's very few people out there that are healthy. I'm sorry to say that, but just in the preponderance of all the narcissism that's happening in society, and people that don't seem to care about anybody else, and all the emotional vampirism that I've seen. I mean, we wouldn't even be addressing all these points if these things didn't exist. Um, uh, you know, Annie and I don't know Jamie as well yet, but I'm sure I will get to know her. But all I need to know is that you guys are friends, and you have told me so many good things about conversations that you guys have had, and you've talked about it again tonight in answering these questions. So my point is, having people around you is extremely helpful for that reevaluation.
Yeah.
Can a person do that? I mean, that's the question we're going to answer. Can you do this alone? We're not there yet, so I'll save that part. But I just think it's beautiful to hear you talk about being able to see that. And I don't expect a person to see it every time just on their own. I mean, I just think you're blessed to have some people around you that are able to see it. So you're not having to look at it alone. And these are people that you trust. And so that's a
Yeah.
huge, huge benefit to have people around you to help with this. So thank you for your answer. Um, there was something else I wanted to mention, but I can't remember what I was going to say. So I'll just move forward.
Can I add something real
Oh,
quick?
of course.
So the last question, can we have liberty in our own lives? I think yes. Now I know as a believer, I have freedom in Christ,
Yeah.
but I'll add that this journey and the asking questions and the digging, I know, and we've talked about this before, that people can get sidetracked and completely overwhelmed and overcome with digging into their past and walking through it. And it becomes what they focus on all the time. And that's not,
Yeah.
we've talked about how that's not necessarily healthy. You want to have a balance.
Yeah.
For me, the Holy Spirit really does keep a good balance.
Yeah.
Keeps me in check to where I'm not doing too much research or too
Right.
much reading or too much digging, that I take breaks, that I allow myself to process like the time, because I have this expectation of myself to learn, grow, and be done with it quickly. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I want this done this weekend. Come on. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
Right. Right.
Which is good. I think when it does take a little bit of time and you do process, it's
Yeah.
very beneficial, because I think the reprogramming that you're doing, it tends to stick better. But can we have liberty in our own lives? I think recognizing that we have choices, like we've been talking about this whole show, is there's some liberty in that. Really, and that's all I have to say about that. I think there's such liberty in knowing that we
Yeah.
have choices.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jen. So I won't take very long with these three. The one I want to spend the most time with is, can we reprogram ourselves? I mean, the other questions are just as important. But I remember when computers started to be personal home computers started to come out, and everyone started having this before the internet was as big as it is now. But people could have a personal computer at their house, and it did a number of things. I remember some of the Commodore 64. I don't expect anyone to remember that, but Marcus had one before I did. He had a Commodore 64, and it had these, which would be considered horrible, archaic games that you could play on it, using the up, left, right, down, up, down key
Yeah.
to move around and stuff. But it was fascinating to us because we never seen anything like that. So those early games, even Pong, which is one of the first video games that was
Oh
created,
yeah.
it had a little roller
It's the best.
thing. Yeah, it was the best, and because it was new. It was new, and the games now are sick when it comes to uh, uh, just how detailed they are, the graphics and all that. I mean, to compare the two would be ridiculous. But anyway, my point is, I remember them talking about what programming was. So basically, they had a floppy disk, and they have different things. You can just download a program now, but in order to put something in the computer, you had to have a floppy disk that you would enter. You'd put it in the computer, and it had a program on it, and you'd have to load the program. That seems pretty simple. Um, Still works the same way. Just as nobody uses a floppy disk anymore. You just generally download something on the internet, and you download the program onto your device. So that's the way it works in most cases. So I remember someone, and I forget who it was that said it to me, but they were talking about the kind of language that people use, and they were making the point that when you're around people that use bad language, that's generally what you take in, and that's what comes out. And they were making the same point about the kind of music you listen to. Obviously, this was a church situation, but then they followed up by apparently they knew something about computers, and they were saying, just like programming computer, the computer itself is not good or bad. You can put things into the computer, and the computer will be able to do certain tasks, whatever you tell it to do. So the computer isn't evil in and of itself. It's what you put into it. You put the programs in, and it does what you tell it to do. So in this idea of programming, if bad programming comes in, that's generally what comes out. I'm sure it's not true in every case, but I think basically it's true. So if we have bad programming, so the question is, can we reprogram ourselves? Yes, you simply change the programming. So we have been programmed with good and bad things, as I said on the outset in the write up. In talking about my parents, they taught me good things and they taught me bad things. And as an adult, I have to look back and decide which things I want to keep and which things I want to throw away or delete, put in the recycling bin. And there have been a lot of things that I have wanted to get rid of. Some things are harder than others. Some things take more time, as Jen was saying. She wants to when she realizes something is some bad programming, she wants to, hey, let's get this done over the weekend and move forward. And some things she can do that. Some things are really, really easy to change. It's really easy to program. Other things are deeper programs. There's more disk space being taken up by some things than
Yeah.
others. So it takes more work to do that. But to answer this question, can we reprogram ourselves? Absolutely. I believe that the mind is way more complex than a computer. A computer can, more processing, things like that. But if you really knew how our brains function, I have looked into this a little bit, and it's even, it's beyond me to understand all the ins and outs. I don't think anyone understands all the inner workings of the human brain. I think they're still trying.
It's a mystery.
Scientists. And I think they say that they know things that they don't know. That's just my opinion. But the bottom line is that our brains can process a lot. And if the programming coming in is good, then that's generally what comes out. If the programming is bad, that's what generally comes out. So if you've had bad programming, you can change that by replacing it with good programming. And how does a person do that in their own life? Figure out what the bad programming is and override it with the good programming.
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful to somebody.
Yeah, that's genius, because I don't think people understand that you can't just stop, bad programming. You have to replace it with something.
Yes.
Like I didn't recognize that my inner thoughts, my inner dialogue was so destructive.
Yeah, it
And
was.
just how I talked to myself in my head, the things I would say to myself. But
Mhm.
it wasn't until I started replacing what I was saying with good things
Right.
that it started to deprogram that old crap.
Right.
I kept wanting it to change, but I wasn't saying anything different to myself. I was like, what? How is this not working? So good points. I'm going to post the next questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jen, for your backup comments on that. I'll just say I've got to answer the other two, but um, this concept is even biblical. The idea of good and bad programming. Um, let's see. Hold on. I'm going to pull it up real quick. Okay, so this is from Philippians 4. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice. I just pulled it up really quick. That's not the version that I really wanted, but it still gets the point across. So this idea of telling us that to think about things that are good rather than bad. Now, that's not to say that in terms of a revolution, sometimes you have to look at the bad things first in order to get to the good things. You have to be aware of what the bad things are first.
Yeah.
Maybe there are people out there that don't have to look at their childhood and they can just make changes, across the board without knowing what their real problems are. I suppose that's possible, but I think, at least for me, I've had to really examine what things have been destructive in my upbringing, and not just my upbringing, but from society and schools and governments. I have so many stories about teachers I've had in the past, that just the horrible things that they said to me that I remember to this day.
Oh,
That's
man.
that's programming that has to be changed.
Yep.
If I believe whatever teacher told me, I'll just share this one thing really quick. In second grade, I had a teacher, and she was I didn't know what a narc was back then, but my guess is that she was definitely a narc before they even really had a term for it. But she had it in for me for some reason. I have no idea what it was that she didn't like about me. But I'm deaf in one ear, and there's this game that we played. It's called Telephone, where we all sit in a circle and you whisper something into someone's ear, and it goes around the circle and it comes back around, and at the end, the last person to hear the secret that's been whispered, they say what it is. And the point is that things, even if you're whispering thing in someone's ear, what you hear at the end is not the same thing as what it starts out to be. And the point is being made about gossip and how it changes and blah blah blah. But I was deaf in one ear, and so when it came around, it would go around one side and it was fine. If it came to my right ear, I could hear what was being said. May not be how it started, but I was at least able to hear it, and I would be able to pass it along. And so when it came around the other way, I would try to turn my head so to the right so I could hear. Well, she didn't like that. She wanted it to go into my deaf ear, and then so every time I was the one that got it wrong when it came around that way because I couldn't hear what was being said. So this is just one example, and she, because of that, there was also some things with reading, and when she did these things, I didn't like her, and I didn't want to participate. And I'm not saying that was right, but in second grade, that's when it started for me. When I didn't like someone or I didn't want to do something, I just decided not to do it. So, long story short, she told my mother that I would have trouble reading, that I couldn't read properly because I refused to participate in group reading situations. I was so upset with her, and I didn't like her, and I didn't want to participate. So rather than figuring out that maybe it's the way that you're treating me that's the problem, she decided that I was stupid and a horrible reader. And of course, my mother was furious at me because she said, "You're not participating." All right, she knew me very well, and she knew that there was something else going on. And she marched me down to talk to the teacher, and she was very angry. With the teacher, and she knew something else was going on. She didn't get to the bottom of it. But anyway, my point is, I was told by a teacher, and she told my mother that I had a reading problem, which was not true at all. When we transferred to this area, and I went to a private Christian school, and this isn't bragging, I'm just trying to make the point. I won awards in that school for being the fastest reader with the most comprehension. There was nothing wrong with my reading. It was a personality problem that I had with the teacher. But if I believed that, what if I believed what she said about me? What if my mother believed the teacher that I had some kind of reading problem, and they made an issue out of it? And I would have believed that lie, that there was something wrong with me, that I, would never be able to read at a regular reading level with everyone else. And that was not the case. That's just one example. So, getting rid of the lies, looking at the bad things in order to change them is incredibly important.
Yeah.
These next two, I'm just gonna say, for the sake of time, yes, we can be free. Yes, we can have liberty in our own lives. We may not have liberty in the country that we live in fully, with all the things being taken away, and it seems like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are going right out the window, little by little, and that's another show. But yes, in our own lives, I do believe to a certain extent we can be free and we can have liberty in our own lives. Jen, does peace exist in this world? Can we have peace in this world?
Yes.
Okay.
I know for me, there's a certain amount of peace that comes to growing and changing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is the stuff we talk about here, the healing. But my main source of peace comes from God.
Mm-hmm.
I am honestly, and this isn't a brag on me, this is a brag on God. I'm
Right.
honestly shocked sometimes. I sit and I'm like,
Right.
whoa, at how calm and how much peace I have with everything that's going on in the world. I am like, what?
Right.
It's one of those things where I'm like, that's not me at all.
Right.
How is this happening? I don't know. Okay. Uh, so yeah,
That's a great point. Well, biblically speaking, it's the peace that passes all understanding. That's the way that the verse reads, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
And it really does. I don't
yeah.
understand it, but I accept it. Like,
Right.
okay.
We accept it. Yeah. Because there's a lot of things going on right now without going into details about it. Everyone knows what's going on, and it's not a peaceful time for a lot of people. A lot of people are in turmoil and having not just health issues, but issues with dealing with mandates and rules and regulations that are being put on people. And yeah, I mean, we could do a whole show about the things I've heard are happening in Australia, but we'll save that for another time. I mean, because that affects Glenn and people that are in that country, and we have a lot of things. I think each country is dealing with its own stuff. But does peace exist in this world? I should have framed the question better. Now, when I said world, I was talking about in our own world, not.
Oh, okay.
No, you didn't do anything. It's the way I formed the question. Like the question before, I asked correctly: can we have liberty in our own lives? I wasn't talking about liberty in the world. I would love to have liberty in the world, but
Yeah, that'd
I
be
don't
great.
have any control over that. So does peace exist in our own world?
Like within ourselves.
Yeah, within ourselves. I'm going to just go with your answer too, because I agree 100%. Regardless of what's happening in the world, we can have peace within ourselves. But it can be difficult to get there, and you may not even fully understand how you got there once you have some peace. But it really starts with all these things that we've mentioned leading up to this point: the self-evaluation and reevaluating and growth and change and all those things. They can lead to a peace, and oftentimes it does pass on any understanding. You may not even understand it completely, like Jen was saying. What about you, Glenn? What do you think about this? Does peace exist in this world?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, Pete, but you corrected the question. So, yeah, yes, it does.
Okay. What does a revolution look like to you? What does a revolution? And I'll go first. What does a revolution look like to you? I was very passionate about this particular topic, and when I started writing it, I couldn't ignore all the things that I'm aware of that are happening. But like I said in the write-up, I know that I can't do much. And there are people that would argue with that. They'll say, "Oh yeah, you know, even as this individual person, you can make changes." Well, I mean, yeah, I understand that concept. All I know that I can change is me. I can't change anyone else. I think, Jen, you also agreed to that. You said that earlier. You can't make anyone change along with you. You can only change you. So that's the way I have to look at it. Now, the point I made in the write-up was the change starts with you. I mean, you can't affect change in the greater world if you're not even willing to work on yourself. So the revolution starts with you. So what it looks like to me is all the things that we've mentioned. Realizing that there's a problem, making a choice to change it, taking all the steps that are necessary to do that. And that may be different for each person that's doing it, but sticking with it, having the courage to stick with it, even if it's hard, and realizing that this is a lifetime choice. It's not ever going to end. You'll always be, hopefully always be changing. You never get to a point where you're done, hopefully. That's what it looks like to me. What do you think, Jen? What does a revolution look like to you?
I was, while you were talking earlier, I was curious, and I went to look at the definition for revolution: a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system.
Whoa, there you
And
go.
I thought, dang, that really ties it up, especially when we're talking about a self-revolution.
Yeah.
And getting rid of old programming and in favor of a new system or program.
Replacing it.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. It's just rewriting a lot of old stuff. And it's amazing to me how many of it are lies.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
just like, or even perceptions. I think we forget that when you're kids, because you haven't lived this long life and you don't have wisdom that adults have, or some adults have, um,
Yeah.
you are perceiving things through this childlike lens. And I remember so many different things that I perceived, and it wasn't that they were outrightly said to me, but it was how in a way, in my childlike mind, it was like 1 + 1 = 2. Well,
Right.
if I don't see my mom and dad ever cry, then I perceived that crying wasn't okay.
Right.
That's how it filtered,
Yeah.
into my mind.
Yeah.
I had a point I was going to, but I don't remember what it is.
That was programming for you.
Yes.
The absence
Yeah.
of
So,
crying.
yeah. Yep. So some
Yeah.
of the programming is even childlike perceptions, things that we
Yes.
just feel like is the truth because of
Right.
what we're pulling from our limited knowledge as a child. What
Right.
we are. Yeah. So
Right.
I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, because children can't decide whether it's good programming or bad. I mean, they don't know that. I mean, they have to be taught the difference. I mean, I don't think that we come out of the womb knowing. I mean, we come out of the womb innocent, in my opinion. I mean, we're not capable of doing anything wrong at that point, but we're only as good as our parents are in teaching us things and programming, whether it's intentional or not. Kids are like sponges. Our brains are like sponges. We pick up on everything and we see everything. Our eyes are wide open at this bright, shiny new world that we're being introduced to. At least that was the case for me. And so I think parents have to be very careful about what they expose their child to. Um, and it's all part of that. So, do you have anything else to add, Jen? What does a revolution look like to you?
No, I was waiting
Okay.
for us to get to the next question.
Okay.
Before I
So,
do that.
Glenn, what does a revolution look like to you? And then we'll move to the next one.
Well, I think if you're speaking of a revolution in terms of external change, to me, it's quite obvious you need to undertake your own revolution first,
Right.
as been
Yeah.
suggested, before you can get a group of like-minded people. That doesn't mean
Right.
overthrowing the government necessarily, but
No. No.
it's really at a much lower key than that. And I think, but whoever makes changes or constructive changes, if they essentially don't even know what peace is within themselves.
Wow. That's an excellent point.
Gosh, that's beautiful.
I agree 100%. I'll ask this next question of you first, Glenn. What can we expect from others close to us when we strive for our own revolution? I think this is a good question. What can we expect from others close to us when we strive for our own revolution?
Or we can hope for support.
Yep.
And at the same time, I think it probably exposes those who are not close to us when we strive for our own revolution. So what can we expect? Well, yeah, I don't think I expect anything really, but if it comes, I'd be very appreciative.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Glenn. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Jen. Jen said it.
No, I was just
Jen,
joking.
yeah, I know, but she said she was raring to go, and I went to Glenn first. So go ahead, Jen. What can we expect from others close to us when we strive for our own revolution?
I've experienced two things. Well, more than two, but I'll just focus on two. I think that sometimes the people around us can buck the new system.
Yes.
They're used to the old programming, the old
Yes.
role that you
Yep.
play, whether it's
Yep.
in a family or a relationship or friendship.
Good point.
But one thing I've just been amazed by, and Glenn's talked about this a couple times, and I know for him it's the universe, and for me it's God.
Right.
But it's amazing the people that come around you or that you stumble across. I don't even know what it is exactly, but I
Right.
don't believe in coincidences. So, um, but it's like God provides people around you. They may not be your family or your
Right.
spouse or the people that maybe you expected to rally around you as
Yes.
you're doing this self revolution thing.
Yes.
Um, but it is amazing that you can have people around you that support you and that encourage you in that growth and in that hard journey.
Mhm.
more times than not, I'm sure it's been people that have done their own, so they
Yeah.
understand. They have an understanding that it's hard, it's difficult, and that how important and imperative it is to have people around you that are encouraging you and
Wow.
cheering you on. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
really big deal. So for me, I've had a little bit of pushback with my family, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's on purpose. I really
No.
don't. Um, but it's interesting to me when I'm like over here trying to embrace this healthier way,
Yes.
and I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean you're not on board?
Yeah. Why? Why are you on board?
I was like, wait.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it's difficult to try to reprogram yourself if you're in that kind of a situation where you're
Yes.
expecting a different response from people that you
Yeah.
thought were in your corner or thought they understood, or
Yeah.
um, because for me at least, I have, I think I'm doing something good by sharing or trying to change what I had been doing the last 40 years with them, and
Yeah.
then it backfires.
Yeah.
Like it blows up in my head. I'm like, why isn't this working? Like I thought this,
You're not responding to
so
my
it's
commands.
no, it's not commands. But it is wonderful to have, I think that's just so important. And I know not everybody has that. And that's my prayer for people, that when they're on this journey to a new self revolution, that God would provide them with people in their life that'll encourage them and ask the hard questions and cheerlead them on, because it is difficult. I think, and we talked about this to the last show. I think Glenn had a great question about how it seems to be the safer and easier route to
Yes.
just not bother with it. Just continue doing what you know. It feels safe, but is
Yeah.
it actually? It feels like it'll be fine, but will it really be, in
No.
the long run? So that's just my prayer for people, that they would have people around them that would encourage them and lift them up as they're going through that process. Not to do it for them or try to rescue anything, but to
Right.
encourage and support.
Wow, that's
So
beautiful. I'm glad you phrased it like that. Yeah, it's not wanting people. In fact, I don't think you can. Well, I don't think I know you can't have people change for you, but to have someone be encouraging, that's a huge gift. And I think there are a lot of people that don't have that. So if you have anyone in your life that is um, coming with you as you're on this journey, and they're being supportive in the
yeah,
ways that you said, Jen, that is just a beautiful thing. And I think it's so easy to do. It's so easy to be encouraging. It doesn't take much energy for you to encourage someone, even if you don't agree with what they're doing. I mean, just be supportive.
yeah,
I mean, it just seems super simple to me.
yeah.
Okay, so on this one, my answer would be similar to yours, Jen. That was a really really good answer. Um, so I don't really have anything to add. All I'll add is that having gone through this myself, my family was not supportive at all in me making changes. They were very comfortable with the role I had always been playing.
Yeah.
As I've said, my role was the black sheep slash scapegoat for the family. And it took me a long time I mean, I realized that that was my role a long time ago. And I worked on a lot of it and thought I was done. But the last thing, and I've talked about this before, I'm not going to go on a big long thing, but the proving, that was the last thing that I'm aware of that I was still doing and wasn't aware of with my family. I was still trying to prove that I'm not in the role anymore. I'm not playing this role. I'm done.
But you
And
proving was still keeping you
still,
kind of.
yes, me proving was saying, hey, I still need to do penance for the role that you put me in. Not that I even had been brainwashed that the decisions I made, which basically what I see now is I was trying to escape an abusive family situation. So I would go away and then I would feel guilt and shame about the fact that I left my family. But whenever I left my family, I would strive. I would do very well, and I see it clearly now. But when I would tell the story to someone else, I would always say, yeah, my rebellious years. Well, it was a rebellion, so to speak. It was a revolution, and I wish I would have stuck with it. I really do. I wish I would have not kept coming back to the same abusive situation. So yes, I can say a lot about this particular topic, but um, I'll just say for the sake of brevity, that we don't have anything that we can expect from others. What Jen said was great. If we have someone that's encouraging, that's a bonus. I would tell people not to expect anyone to love that you're changing your role in your family. I'm sure there are situations where someone says, "Hey, oh, good, I've wanted you to change this for a long time," but I think that's probably very rare. Okay, moving right along. Can we do it alone, Jen?
You know, um, I think it's possible to do it alone.
Hmm.
Now, for me, in my context as a believer, I'd say, I could do this alone with God's help.
Right.
Um, so that's my answer.
Okay. What about you, Glenn? Can we do it alone?
I mean, I would be a fool, I think, if I said you couldn't. But I think I think you can look. It's almost it's weird because if you do this alone and you don't practice it with somebody, a lot of this becomes pointless because
Good
ultimately
point.
this is about community and people
Right.
and sharing it.
Right.
I mean, if you're just going to be someone who's totally disconnected from every other person, what's the point anyway?
Right. Right.
Got me.
I think that's a good point. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was can we do it alone? I'm going to skip the next question, which was I'll read what it was. It was who can we trust to come alongside us on the journey? I think that was addressed in the one of the last questions, what we expect from others. So on that one, we can trust anyone who's trustworthy, and it sounds ridiculous, but people that are encouraging and they don't seem to buck the system. If you have a person like that, they're precious. And a lot of people don't have that, so we can trust anyone that's trustworthy, and that seems ridiculous, but we'll move forward. Okay, Jen, what tools can aid us on this path of revolution? What tools would be helpful for someone to have on this journey?
Gosh, I would say God is a huge tool for a believer.
Right.
Um, I think Glenn made a great point, having people around you that you can practice with.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I love hearing his stories about I think it was with Linda practicing fighting. She wanted to fight to practice. Um, I just think that's awesome. I
Yeah.
think having people around you that are healthy, that even can understand what you're pulling yourself out of, like what you're getting out of, and what healthy looks like,
Mhm.
would be very, very beneficial and a great tool. Um, Gosh, what else? I know for me, support groups have been huge.
Yeah.
Um, Connecting with people that have been through similar things, like for me, narcissistic abuse,
Yeah.
just like toxic
Hmm.
relationships, um, online. And you had mentioned earlier, you kind of have to be careful about some of
Yeah.
the stuff you watch. But I've found a lot of really wonderful channels.
There are. There are.
Psychiatrists
Yeah.
that have channels that really dig deep into, um and it's not just like pointing the finger. Of course, it's showing you this is what a toxic person looks like, and these are the tactics they use, and this is
Mhm.
what a narcissist is, and these are all the different kinds of narcissists. There's all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which is important. But I love a lot of these channels that I listen to because it really helps you turn the spotlight on yourself.
Right.
One of the biggest things is, gosh, my brain just went blank. Like just for an example, the cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
If you don't heal the core wounds and the core hurts, and figure out and ask yourself the hard question as to why did I choose this person
Yep.
to marry, or why did I stay connected to
Yes.
my family system that was so toxic? When you can
Yes.
get to the bottom of that, it just really helps you understand the dynamic on a whole different level, to where you're not choosing those people anymore, because you
Yep.
hear those stories over and over again of, people getting into toxic situation after toxic situation, and it may look a little bit different on the surface, but the bones
Yep.
are the same. When you
Wow.
can really dig into the why, and there's so many different why questions when it comes to that.
Yes.
There's so many. It can be a little overwhelming,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that is huge.
Hmm.
The educating yourself, and
Yeah.
yes, on the people around you that may have put the programming in there in the first place,
Yeah.
but also digging into yourself, and the whys as to why did I believe those things?
Yeah.
Why is their opinion of me more important than my own, or
Mm.
more important than God's? Like those kinds of questions. Just a
Good.
big, huge deal with
Oh,
tools.
great answer. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jen. I'll agree with everything that you said. I would say God, the Bible, YouTube. Be careful, but there's YouTube. Just like Jen said, there are valuable channels that you can use for tools. The things that we've mentioned, having people come alongside you if you have them, having that support group is crucial
Yeah.
for any kind of journey. But if you don't have that, there are plenty of other ways to get help. Joining a group, again, joining a group that deals with the same kind of things that you deal with. There's a lot of value in that. So I'll just stop there. I think that we've mentioned enough. Glenn, what about you? Any other things that we haven't mentioned? What tools can aid us on our path?
I'm not sure whether it's a tool, but I'd say get off your ass and go see the world and get involved in it. Expose yourself to as much as you can.
Okay. All right.
That's not going to be what most people would do, but I'd be
That's
on
right.
the next plane to Africa or something. That sounds good.
It's
Or
And that's helped you tremendously, Glenn,
oh
yeah,
as you've
man, it
shared.
has changed my life
yeah,
dramatically.
yeah, yeah. That's your answer. I mean, that's your answer. That's why we ask the questions. You can answer how you feel best to answer for sure.
Well, I think
And
when you can relate your own situation to what you see with others, it changes your whole outlook and attitude perspective. I think it's all these things we've been talking about or speaking about.
yeah, yeah,
It's just it is so eye opening to be profound.
yep.
So there you
Okay.
go.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, we're coming down to the end, guys. So how do we know? This is a long question, but I think it's an important one. How do we know our own personal revolution is beneficial to those around us instead of harmful? And then the kicker on that one, and does that matter or should it? So I'll read it again. How do we know our own personal revolution is beneficial to those around us instead of harmful? And does that matter or should it? And Jen, you like this question, so I'll ask you first. What do you think about this one?
Gosh, how do we know? I think when connection happens, and when you meet people on your journey,
Hmm.
that you walk away from conversations like energized and ready to tackle life, and you feel like your batteries have been charged.
Hmm.
I think I think that shows a lot of things, but one of the things it can show is that it's beneficial to the people around you, because hopefully they're feeling the same thing. It's not just based on like my experience with them per se,
Right.
but when you can see that you sharing your journey with them as they're sharing their journey with you, you
Uh-huh.
can see that there's this mutual growth,
Right.
this mutual excitement, this mutual kind of healing, and it may even be in
Yeah.
different ways. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because we're different
Different
people.
categories and yeah.
But gosh, beneficial to those around us. I also think when you start seeing that it's challenging other people
Yeah.
to look at their own stuff,
Yes.
I think that's very beneficial.
Yeah.
Now, it may just be planting a seed, and they may go along their merry way, and you might disconnect, as
Right.
friends. But sometimes that happens. And then the
Yes.
last part, does it matter or should it? Um, I don't think necessarily we should heal with the sole purpose of trying to benefit others. Like, that's always a great thing.
Yeah.
But I think, like, it's the oxygen mask
Yes.
picture again,
Yeah.
trying to make sure that you're breathing and you're okay in order to help other people.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
I do think it should. I think it should matter. Um,
Okay.
yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. So, how do we know our own personal revolution is beneficial to those around us instead of harmful? And does that matter or should it? We don't know. We don't know how our own revolution is going to impact other people until it happens. Um, when you start changing and growing in your own world, I can't tell you how it's going to affect other people. I can only say that it will. I can't imagine a scenario where you don't do a revolution in your own life and you're changing and breaking programming and you're growing and you're not the same person you used to be in pretty much all of your relationships. That is going to have either a positive or negative effect on the relationships that you have. You may find out in your revolution that all the quote unquote friends that you had are not good for you at all. You
Yeah.
might even find out your family of origin isn't healthy for you. There's a lot of people that do not talk to their families anymore. They decide that for them it's only harmful for them. So is that beneficial to the family? No. For them, I'm sure it's harmful. But a person has to make the decision for them that's best for their own survival. And if you decide that your family's not good for you, then that's your decision that you have to make. Um, does it matter or should it? I am not trying to go against Jen on this one. Her opinion is her opinion, but for me, it shouldn't matter. Um, your it's important that you heal and grow and change. And if someone is standing in the way of that, it shouldn't matter. It just shouldn't. And I know that may seem callous and cold. I don't want my family to not care whether I make changes or not. But if they're at a point where they want to keep me in the same role that I've always been in, then I can't let that matter to me. I have to move forward. I have to do what's best for my own survival and my own um, journey toward being healthy. Um, so I hope I explained that well. We'll go to
Yeah,
Glenn.
you did. You did explain that very well. And
Okay.
there's a part of me that agrees with that as well.
Okay. Yeah. Glenn, how do we know our own personal revolution is beneficial to those around us instead of harmful? And does that matter or should it?
I tend to side more with you, Crips, on this one. I think it is totally irrelevant whether it's beneficial or harmful because that's not for us to decide. I think if we call it our
Good point.
obligation or responsibility is to offer it to people and let them choose.
Great point.
And does it matter? No, I don't. If someone wants to listen to and connect with me, my door is open. But if they choose not to, that's their choice. They can go. If they think anything I say is harmful, they don't have to listen. They can walk off.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, Crips. I think it's nothing to do with making an assessment of what's
Yeah.
beneficial and what's not. We've just got to say, okay, this is me. Here I am.
Yeah.
Yada yada. Take it from there.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, Jen has a beautiful, wonderful, amazing heart. And I tell her that all the time, and I know what she means by that. She doesn't mean that, if you get to the point where uh, what someone else thinks about your own revolution is standing in the way, she would choose to not let that bother her. I know that she would, but she
Yeah.
cares about her family. She cares about the people around her, and she doesn't want to just write them off. And I understand that. That's a good thing. I'm just saying if it gets to the point, whoever is standing in your way of you surviving and learning how to live a life that is beneficial to you first, not in a self-absorbed way. I keep having to say that because there's criticism that, at least in Christian circles, that, well, we're supposed to think of other people first. Well, how do you get to that point? I mean, the command is love your neighbor as yourself. So how do you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? That's what it comes down to for me. And all these topics and all these questions that we've been asking, for me, it comes down to that. It is the bottom line. If you're a believer, it's the bottom line of everything. Love God with all of your heart and love your neighbors yourself. How can that happen if you don't love yourself? If you think that you're a piece of garbage, you don't see your value, your programming has been nothing but bad about you, how do you love other people out of that? I mean, we've talked about this in so many different ways. I don't think it's possible. So it's not a selfish love of self that we're talking about. It's not just, oh, I'm the best thing, I don't care what other people think. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you are in a place where you don't consider yourself worthy of living a life, you don't consider yourself worthy of having good relationships or loving relationships, you're allowing people to abuse you left and right. I don't see how that person in those situations can be loving towards other people and fulfill Jesus's command. Love your neighbor, love God with everything, love your neighbors yourself. I'm not even sure how you can love God uh, fully if you just think that you're garbage. If you just have this really really low idea of who you are as a person. So that's a topic for another time. We've got 4 minutes left, so we're going to ask the last question. Can our own personal revolution be a beacon of light to others? And I'll go very quickly on this. Absolutely. Now, this is a question Jen added, and I love it. Can our own personal revolution be a beacon of light to others? And you mentioned it earlier, Jen, when you were saying, when we make a change, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, but when we change ourselves for the better, people that are healthy are going to cheer. They're going to be your cheerleader, like you said. But even if at first they don't like the changes you're making, you can you can shine light. Light is light, regardless of whether people recognize it or not. Light is light, and if they don't see it right away, I do believe that there are certain people that will see it eventually. They'll see that your changes are making you a more loving, more gentle, more kind person that has the ability to think about others. I mean, if you're doing that for yourself first, that opens things up. It doesn't close things down for helping other people. It doesn't make you not want to be more loving towards others at all. It's the opposite of that, in my opinion. What do you think, Jen? Is that we
I'm
got
gonna say ditto. That
ditto?
was
Okay.
beautifully said.
Glenn, what's your answer on this? Can our own personal revolution be a beacon of light to others?
Yeah, I definitely agree, but I think the beacon of light works in two ways. One is that people can agree with that and gain light from it, but the other thing is that people can totally disagree with what you say, but it can still be light because it'll helps them eliminate the things that they don't want for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
a double win, I see.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Agree.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, guys. We appreciate you being part of this program tonight. I just want to make a quick announcement. I didn't talk to Glenn about this. I did talk to Jen about it. I just left my mind.
Under a minute.
Under a minute. Okay. We're going to discontinue the Tuesday night meetings for a while. What we can do is if anyone wants to talk with us, please just put it in Discord and we can set up a time to speak with you. No problem with that whatsoever. It's just a lot of times we come in there and nobody shows up, and that's not a guilt and shame thing. It's just, if a bunch of people are showing up, we will continue to do that. But we're just for a while. Just let us know if you want to speak to us in there, and we'll be more than happy to set up a time that works for all of us. Okay. All right. I hope everyone has a good week, and we'll be back again next Sunday. I don't know who's doing the write up, but we'll talk about that. And thank you again for being a part of it. And we'll see you guys next Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining.